Facebook
like we're live.
people.
Okay, everyone, Talking Time with Caffeine, the only podcast where we drink caffeine and hopefully try to get smarter.
Excellent.
Both of my guests have been here before, but a little bit of introduction never hurts anybody. So reintroduce yourselves and tell me what y'all do.
What do you want, Jackson? You want to go first? You can go first, or I can. Doesn't matter to me.
Ladies first.
Okay. I'm Erica. I go by Gutsick Gibbon on YouTube. I am sort of a primatologist in training. I'm getting my master's of research in primate behavior, biology, and conservation. I got my undergraduate degree in animal science and a minor in anthropology as well as a minor in biology. So I really like monkeys. That's my whole deal. Monkeys and human evolution. So that's my field, so to speak, if I can be so generous to myself. That's it. That's my introduction.
That's much cooler than me.
I promise it's not.
Oh no, I have no accreditation as of yet. I won't get my bachelor's until December, so
That's close though. You're really close.
Yeah. Allegedly.
No, come on, give yourself some.
I'm Jackson. Hi. I've got my YouTube channel. That's primarily what I do. Talking about evolutionary biology and whacking creationists. And I do school at bachelor's in field and organismal once I finally get it. So that's really about it. That's all I like fish.
Yeah.
You do like fish. You like tetrapods. You like amphibious tetrapods, right?
I've got
before
one.
we got on,
Darwin the axolotl back.
That's who I'm. Yeah, I know. I knew you had one in there. I was like, I know he's got an axolotl. I know he likes some tetrapods.
Before we got on, Jackson said he wanted to be your Padawan learner.
Right. Yeah. Because you're the master of the trip, and that would make me the lowly Padawan.
At least you've got tetrapods in your house. I've got no pets right now, which sucks.
Hey, well, you got at least one tetrapod in your house.
I got myself.
That's true.
Yeah.
I am a tetrapod.
I got a new fish just yesterday. I got a blue ram cichlid, and he's just a little guy right now. They're very pretty.
Oh, go easy on him. He's small.
So you got what's it? An O. It starts with an O. I can't pronounce it. O. I can't pronounce it. O something. The Boniclade.
Ostichthes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have fish or you have vertebrata, which breaks down into what is it? Agnatha, which is the lampreys and hagfish, the living jawless fish, and you have chondrichthes, which is the cartilaginous fish, sharks, skates, and chimeras, and those guys. And then you have all the other fish are concentrated in Ostichthes, which then breaks into Sarcopterygia, which is the lobe-finned fish on the one side, and Actinopterygia on the other side, which is the ray-finned fish, which the ray-finned fish then breaks down again into Polypteriformes, which is the bichures and ropefish, and gars and gars and paddlefish, and bowfins and sturgeons, and then you have all the rest of the fish, which are in the teleosti. So
can we pour one out for the Chinese paddlefish? Is that okay?
Sure.
Right? Oh man, that was sad.
That's so sad. That bummed me out for like at least a week. Every time I thought about fish, I was like, fucking Chinese paddlefish. Sorry, apologize. The freaking Chinese paddlefish.
So
yeah, they still have the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say before we get to our main topic, Erica's been active in the debate scene again. You debated STF twice now.
Yeah, me and Standing have been going toe to toe. We're supposed to have another one, but I need it to be before the 18th, or it can't happen until June. So we'll see. So
is he comparing? Is he the same, better, or worse than when your debate with KH?
Yeah, I think Standing's better than Kent in a lot of ways. And in other ways, I would say sort of worse, I guess. I mean, the things that Standing is better in is at least he kind of knows what he's talking about. But that's also a double-edged sword because the things it kind of seems like he's going off of the replacing Darwin script almost exclusively.
Yeah.
So whenever the script starts to kind of veer off, he tends to have some
He throws
line.
Kent Hovind in there. Once you get him off Jensen, he goes straight to Kent.
He does, but at least he's got Jensen until that point, which at least has the guise of being empirical.
So different talking points or the same talking points that you've seen.
It's like Jackson says. I mean, it depends on if you can get him to leave replacing Darwin or not, or Tompkins. To be fair, he also uses Tompkins
Or Stanford.
Yeah,
he used to be wedded to Sanford, and so when I did my debate with him, I actually wrote my rebuttal in advance because I knew all of his my team and I, we knew all of his talking points. He hasn't asked for a debate since, so I count that as a win.
So
yeah,
Eric,
I think that is a win.
Do you have a team that too, or you a solo act?
I'm a one-woman show at this point. Well, that's not true. I absolutely have, like, when I knew I was going to be discussing genetics, which wasn't initially what it was supposed to be about, if that makes sense, because I'm not a geneticist, so I would never intentionally be like, hey, let's talk genetics. What I wanted to talk about was sort of limited versus universal ancestry, I guess. I was open to the idea of talking genetic entropy just because that doesn't necessarily lend itself just to genetics. But then I saw that the title of the debate was Creationist Genetics, like the day of, and I was like, oh, I should probably get my terms a little bit more straight. So I took genetics in undergrad, but other than that, genetics, and I guess I've had some lectures on like population genetics this semester and conservation genetics, but outside of that limited scope, it's basically been like, well, I got the basics, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? Like, you don't have to be a geneticist to debunk genetic entropy. That's kind of the
No, you really don't.
Yeah, like, you don't have to know the stuff. It helps because when he throws out random terminology, like, obviously I'm not well versed in orphan genes. Like, I knew the term, but I didn't.
Oh my God, they're so stupid. They don't understand anything. Fun fact: when the book comes out, which it's only a few days away from coming out, RJ and I wrote an entire section about the orphan genes because creationists royally screw up all across the board on that, like they do everything else. So,
and the weird, first of all, I believe that, but second of all, it was weird because it's like I've heard creationists like talk themselves raw about pseudogenes and about ERVs. So I was like, I'm ready for both of those. And then he comes out with orphan genes of all things, and I was like, well, I don't know orphan genes well enough to like speak on them, I guess. Like, I wouldn't even consider my knowledge cursory. And so when it was explaining like his definition of them, I was like, okay, so it sounds like it's almost the exact same logic as any other sort of inherited genetic phenomena, right? I mean, they emerge. There are emergent genes. That's just
pretty much it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and so, but then he didn't like when I was like, it sounds to me like you can follow the same logic as pseudogenes or ERVs. Even though I don't know enough about it, it's like, I don't know, Standing's got this weird thing where it's like, if you don't use what the terminology he wants to use, and the reason that I feel like he does that is so he can he's attempting to force you to say what he wants you to say. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I'm just not, you can always tell when he's about to try to lead you into it too. So then you're almost like, all right, like, how dumb do you think I am? Come on, give me a little credit.
I would love to say I have as much experience with him as you, but I can't. I can't say that, unfortunately. Well, I had like 2 conversations with him, which went reasonably well, because things were going okay until he dropped genetic entropy on me, and at that point, I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know about his H1N1 talking points, which are just so backwards, and his misrepresentation of James Crow and Mota Kimura and all that. I wasn't familiar with any of that. And so when he first dropped it on me, I was just kind of like, as far as I'm aware, from what I've read of genetics or population genetics, there's no talk about genomic degradation. So I'm not, but then when I got my team and I started looking into this, we're like, oh no, this is all bull crap.
Yeah. And the thing that kills me about that too is like the whole idea of genetic entropy is that it's straight up a creationist like straight up thievery of error catastrophe, which also doesn't happen. So it's like in one paper, it's like, I'm not an epidemiologist, right? Like I don't understand or anything to do with viruses or pathogens or anything like that. But even I'm capable of reading that H1N1 paper by, I think, Tompkins, right? And being like, this is a bad paper. You know, and I'm a master's student. I'm not a professor. That's when you know it's bad.
It's a doctrinal position. As I did, we did a video on genetic entropy on my channel. It's a doctrinal position. I have a book from 1967. It's a creationist book, and it talks about genetic entropy. The 60s were before the DNA sequencing revolution, so we didn't have population genetic data yet, so they couldn't have made this declaration. So
it's unbelievable.
What you have is this is direct word for word evidence of here's a position we want, and we're never going to give it up, and we're going to scramble for data to affirm it. And so that's really all creationism has ever been. But
right.
The fact that standing acts like, oh, we reasoned to this position. No, you didn't.
No. And the thing that kills me too is that it's like I spent the afternoon prior like watching Standing's talks with geneticists with CRISPR, and that's just the name that he goes by. I'm not sure.
Oh, I know.
Oncologist,
yeah,
right? Or he does oncology. He deals with cancer. And I was floored when I was listening when Standing was like talking about the ENCODE project, and when CRISPR was, and I actually went back and looked, and I think the debate is actually from like 2 or 3 years ago. Debate. Yeah. Anyways, whatever. CRISPR was like, so you're telling me you think that there's a trend for function based off of the ENCODE's poor definition of function, even though that's not what we're seeing? And he's like, yes. So then here we are late, and I couldn't believe that he kept harping that point. And I was like, all right, at least he can't do that now because we have recent literature that puts a cap on that. So he can't say that. And then he straight up just like agree to disagree. And I'm like, that's not what this is.
He's not the only one. Fazal Rana did it too. Because I brought up that's what's his name? He's written. It's the guy who wrote it. It's written a couple of papers. Evaluating ENCODEs, retweeted a couple of them. Oh crap! But anyways, he one's like on the immortality of TV sets or something like that. That's the name of one of the papers he's written. And so, the theory versus the empirical data, and just basically agree to disagree. That's all he did. And so it's like, okay.
And the thing is that it's one thing to look at it from a logical standpoint and be like, yeah, genetic entropy is bad because the way that selection works just doesn't jive with genetic entropy, right? I mean, like you can't have something that is simultaneously bad for fitness that isn't selected against. It just doesn't happen. That's not the definition of fitness. At least as long as, but the point again comes with, is it function, right? Does it display in phenotype in some way? And they straight up just disagree with empirical results that's like reached in a mathematic sense. Like disagreeing with theory, okay, that's dumb, but whatever. Disagreeing with the mathematic results that have been reached via actual experimentation that can be replicated. Sorry, you gotta show it. Like follow the same steps, reach the same conclusion, and come back and tell me that you disagree. But you can't just say no. I don't like the results.
Right. I think. Well, I mean, to be fair, that's what creationism is founded upon. But
fair enough.
But, I don't think he's ever been given the onion test. Standing, have you ever given Standing the onion test?
I have not.
No, I haven't. But I think it would be like I said, I haven't talked to him in like a year. No, like over a year now. So, I think it'd be fun to see him. Well, first, not know what it is, then second, squirm once he figures out what it is and try to rationalize his way around it.
I wonder if he'll do that. I love that thing Kent does, where Kent doesn't know the definition for something, so he says, "Let's tell the audience." You know?
Oh my god! Or what is it? When I did my debate with him, and I wrote my script first, and I sent it off to my guys so they would look it over. They were like, "Oh, this is too technical, Jackson. You're gonna have to dumb. This remove like all of the periods of time that you're referencing. Remove the fossil names. Just you're gonna have to get rid of this. And so it was yeah, because I was like, oh crap, you're right. He wouldn't know any of this.
Yeah.
I'd be talking at him, you know.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah. And you know, and that's, I think ultimately that's where like it's just bones in the dirt thing came from in the first place, was Ken just didn't want to learn the names. So it had nothing to do with the theology or the actual theory behind it. He was just like, I can't be bothered. He couldn't be bothered to learn the names. So whatever, far be it from me. I mean, what he's doing is working for him. So
unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh, we got a bunch of people watching. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. I'm glad everyone's here. Sorry for my loud crunching. I have an affinity for raw pasta, in case I tweeted about it the other day, but I don't know. I like it.
You got a crunch on that launch.
I do. This long guy right here. I don't know. I like him. Hello, first Layla? Lala? Morons everywhere. Fair enough.
It's true. It's like the Buzz Lightyear. Morons everywhere.
You're a sad, strange little man, me at Kent Hovind.
I hope is that in the near future I'll be talking to Long Story Short for the second time. He's not a younger. Well, I say that he's technically not a young Earth creationist. I don't know if he really isn't, because I don't think he really thinks about it. But I should be talking to him again in the near future.
That would be exciting.
It'll be something, all right.
I'm going with exciting.
I found a basic chart. No pictures though.
No. This absolutely works. I'm pretty sure this is fairly contemporary. I think the only thing I can think is that no, that works. Yeah, that works. Bonobos, gibbons, orangs. No, that's good enough. I was wondering. Yeah, I was thinking I do like to eat raw ramen noodles, unfortunately. I have an affinity for raw pasta. I'm not sure what the deal is, but raw noodles, I find them very satisfying to crunch on, so I do so. The only thing here is that I'm not 100% sure that langurs and colobins are more like I almost might flop the old world monkeys, because I think macaques, at least I know rhesus macaques, it's like 90-92 of full genome comparison to humans. I don't know that they've actually sequenced langurs or colobins, or vervets for that matter. But the new world, absolutely, prosimians are all great.
This is better than the other chart. I found another chart where it had tarsiers and lemurs on the same branch.
Yeah, no. Yeah, tarsiers, the Omamiid and the adapted split is where we would see that original split between the prosimians and our sort of tarsier forms. And I think that was around 35 million years ago, if I remember correctly. But the interesting thing is that we're not 100% sure if the Omamiids are stem or not. So whether or not tarsiers should actually be considered Omamiids, or whether or not they're sort of Omamiids and are sort of a stem group of what would become the tarsier forms.
So
it's interesting. It's
almost
weird.
Like they're transitional.
Almost like.
Whoa.
That would be so, but we all know transitions. Come on.
Yeah, I found it.
No, of course not.
Yeah, going back, the thing apparently before primates, there's this group called primate primotiforms.
Yes. So interestingly enough, with the primates, generally what we look at when we're looking at early sort of whether or not they're considered a primate or not, like Purgatorius has been switching back and forth. Purgatorius was originally considered the first primate, and I think that's kind of on the fence now whether or not that's in vogue. Because the thing is that its ankle bones and its dentition are starting to be very primate-like. Not necessarily its formula, but actually the sort of how the molars look, if I remember correctly. So ankle bones, teeth. And that's because the ankle bones are really key for arboreality, right? Because the mammals that originally, Jackson, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mammals that originally survived sort of the end Cretaceous extinction event partially survived because of their burrowing ability. Yes?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And so
I would think so.
it sounds right. And so if from what I remember when I was sort of looking into this for my first human evolution video of sort of our proto-primates, is that we see this sort of timing, this perfect timing with the North American megaflora, right? So the emergence of these big fruiting bodies in North America, and sort of these tree shrew-like ancestors taking to the trees. So becoming from regular shrews to arboreal tree shrews. And that transition can be seen in their ankles. Now, whether or not Purgatorius is a sister group to the proto-primates, what actually would be our first primate, or whether it is in and of itself a primate, it's up for debate. Because we don't really have very much of Purgatorius. Again, we have its ankle bones, we have a lot of its teeth, we have some of its jaw, but I don't know that we have the whole thing. And even if we did, it's still kind of up for debate. That said, it's super interesting. I think that sort of the argument of the first primate, it kind of comes down to, as usual, it kind of comes down to nitpicky details, right? Because what makes a species, right? It's all a gradient.
Oh no. We're not going to get into the arbitrariness of taxonomy, are we?
What is a species? Should we define them?
No, there are no taxonomic rungs. Everything is just a clade.
Okay, cut me some slack though, because finding the origin of an order, like the first member of an order, right? It's not even for sure. Even if we could find a member that's like for sure a primate, and it's the first one in the fossil record, like with no ambiguity, then you're like, all right, well, we still don't know if it's the first primate because we could have a representative that doesn't exist in the fossil record. That sucks.
Here, let me blow your mind. Orders aren't real. There we go.
Wait a second.
Yeah. I don't know. I was I'm finally done writing about the Cambrian for the secret project. The Cambrian and Precambrian, I'm so ready to read something else. Now that I've read Wonderful Life and like dozens of papers on the Cambrian, I'm finally done with it. And having to read about what is a phylum, at what point is something in a phylum, what is the difference between stem members and crown members, and did you know, and this just drove me insane, Arthropoda has been used both as the crown arthropods and the stem plus the crown arthropods.
The only reason I know about that is because I took entomology on a whim. I loved it. It was one of my favorite classes. But interestingly enough, that pissed our professor off so much. When he was teaching us it, he was like, because what are we even talking about here? Words mean nothing.
You know what? He's absolutely right. It's when I realized, because I was like, okay, they're calling Anomalocaris an arthropod. It's not a crown arthropod. What is happening? And then I was reading, I think it was a Budd and Jensen paper, and they're like, or you could say you arthropod. And I was like, everything is dead.
You're like, are you kidding? I had so this is kind of a neat segue, but my project, my actual study is based off of spiteful intervention in pig-tailed macaques in Malaysia. So I'm looking to see if there's dimorphic behavior in the males and females when they intervene in one another's behaviors, and whether or not that could be considered spiteful or selfish or altruistic or reciprocal, whatever, the four fundamental social behaviors, so to speak. And when I was doing my literature review, which, by the way, I'm sure you know, literature reviews suck because you have to find like 100 papers on the subject you're looking at, all of which are one apt, but also have enough holes in them that you can justify your own research. Anyway, so I'm looking into this and I'm like, wait a second. All of these papers I can find are saying spite is not a real thing. Spite cannot be selected for because it's a negative. It's when an individual, let's say we're talking about monkeys. So an individual monkey incurs a cost on themselves in order to impose a cost on another. So logically, right, evolutionarily speaking, that should be selected for. And yet there's hundreds of paper on spiteful behavior in animals. So I'm like, what is going on? And it took me 5 hours of literature searching to find finally a paper by, I think his name is Keith Jensen in 2010, where he's basically like, yeah, the problem is no one's using the same definition. And I was like,
You mean you have to do research?
I was like, wait a second. You guys could have come up with the same definition. Like, we're all using different definitions. And he was like, well, it depends on if you're talking about evolutionarily. So like one of the 4 fundamental behaviors, or like functional, which most functionally spiteful behaviors are inherently selfish in nature. So it's a plus for the actor and a negative for the target. And I was like, that really would have been good to know.
Jeez, I didn't know you have to do research to study stuff.
I know.
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Can you believe it?
It's we're doing like a project for my marine biology class, and so we're doing it on Gracilaria, which is this red algae, and there's all the literature is from like the 80s because they basically said, hey, look, this algae, and then they kind of resolved some of the taxonomy, but not a whole lot, and the Gracilaria is a big component of agar, and so it has an economic importance, but that was kind of it, really. They were like, okay.
Well, yeah, then no one touches it for 20 years, and you're like, I'm using papers from the 80s, like back when, the definitions were completely different. I mean, Pluto's still a planet. That's the kind of science we're doing.
Hey, wait a minute.
That's science never changes, it's always...
Hey, Darwin saith, and so it goes.
Wait a second. You're telling me science changes when the data sort of suggests that maybe it should? That's not right.
Impossible. If it doesn't fit into the shoehorn, it doesn't exist.
No way. I don't believe it.
If the data doesn't support your facts, or wait, no, what is it? If the facts don't support the theory, it changes the facts. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
yeah, that was a hard lesson that when we were first coming up with our projects last semester, whatever. And they were like, here's the thing. They were like, if you're doing your project and the data sort of starts to suggest that maybe your hypothesis was wrong, that's okay. And I was like, what do you mean it's okay? I'm wrong? That doesn't fit into this. That doesn't fit here.
It really be funny if you're doing a report up on stage or whatever, or from your class, and all of a sudden, in the middle of your report, you're like, oh, everything, all of a sudden, this is wrong in the middle of your report. Like, oh, sorry, like you turn it up in the middle of your report. Like, okay, I think I said never mind.
The thing is interestingly enough, it's interesting that you say that, because some of the best presentations I've seen, because we have like seminars where individuals who have been previously PhD students, whatever, they come in and they present their research, and then everybody can go and watch for free, which is really cool. There have been a lot of excellent seminars this year. But some of my favorites are when they get up there and they're like, my hypothesis was blah, 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 after they've introduced their methodology and the field side and the study species. And then they're like, it turns out my hypothesis is completely wrong. And what we actually found out was this, this, and this. And then you're like, all right, this is going to be good. Like, this is going to be a great presentation.
Yeah.
They're always fascinating.
So have you ever been proven wrong in your researches?
I mean, my research is incredibly limited. That my undergraduate research was on my undergraduate research was on the diet habits of civets, which are, they're viverids, so they're small carnivorous or omnivorous, rather, mammals that live in Southeast Asia.
Mongoose cats.
Yeah, mongoose cats. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wanted to study the binturong, but they were like, "You're not going to see a bear cat. You're not going to see. You might smell them. They smell like popcorn, but you won't see them."
Very interesting.
And I thought I smelled one at one point, but then I was like, am I smelling a binturong, or do I just want to smell a binturong? Anyways, my hypothesis was proven correct, but it was also like a dumb it was an easy hypothesis, right? We predicted that civets, which are omnivorous and can readily find fruit during most periods of the year in Thailand, would probably favor meat when we would bait our traps, because we would bait camera traps with meat and with fruit, and then we would wait until they would come across their game cam, so they snap a picture when an individual walks in front or feeds upon the bait trap or whatever. And the reason was because, well, if they've got access to fruit year round, then meat is, of course, a luxury item, so to speak. It's less easy to come by, et cetera, et cetera. So they should probably favor the meat, and they did. But our sample size was so small, we couldn't really get anything out of it. Because it was just a couple of months of a study, and civets are also really, really hard to hard to get on camera, it turns out. So we should have picked a different sunny species. Our other group who went with us were working on temperature preferences of tokay geckos. And tokay geckos are like, literally you can't throw a rock and not hit a tokay gecko. Like when you're in Southeast Asia, they're everywhere. So I don't know if they actually ended up publishing, but they definitely had a healthy amount of data. So yeah, I mean, if we're talking hypotheses and research, no, I haven't been wrong, but I also had a really easy topic, and I'm definitely open to the idea that I'm going to be wrong about my upcoming project because it hasn't been studied very much in the macaque genus. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, that's a good thing is you can admit that you can be wrong or could be wrong or are wrong.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's like you almost kind of hope that you get surprised, right? Because that's usually when the novelties come out. That's when you've got a publishable paper, when you go out there and you're like, oh, wow. Vanta Blue here says the best discoveries don't start with Eureka, but that's funny. And that's pretty dead on from the people that I've at least watched present their own studies. When you're wrong, that's when the excitement starts, I think.
Yeah. So let's start with the basics. What makes a primate a primate?
I think the most general definition that I've heard, at least this year so far, is that primates, they're mammals that tend to be dexterous in both their hands and their feet, at least when compared to other mammals, even with an arboreal lifestyle. But most importantly, they have a larger brain size to body mass than other mammals of their size. Which the argument kind of comes in at that point, because it's like, all right, well, which came first, social group living or a large brain? And that's where you get this really big academic debate that's been going on in the primatology community right now, that's been going on since the 80s with Robin Dunbar and the social brain hypothesis. So why do primates have such big brains? What's the reason? Some people suggest that it's social group living, and that living in large groups requires keeping track of numerous individuals and maintaining these vast networks. So you know who's your kin, who's not your kin, who's your friend, who's not your friend, et cetera, et cetera. Others have suggested it's diet-based, and that because we find at least a correlation, although it's quite weak, between frugivory, heavy frugivory, so eating fruits, and large brains in primates, that's the link, switching from folivory and nuts and things like that to heavy fruit, and that's the reason. Some have suggested that it's a mishap in gestation and developmental period, so that the longer of a gestational period you have, the larger brain you tend to have, and therefore the longer developmental period you have, and that requires a higher sort of paternal investment by the mother usually. And sort of this sort of trade-off goes back and forth until eventually you're selecting for larger brains because you're hoping, sort of naturally speaking, to reap the cost of that development. It's called the developmental cost hypothesis. And lastly, and I think this is definitely should be a part of any of the three previous hypotheses that you're proposing, is the cognitive buffer hypothesis. So this is the idea that having a large brain allows you to react with behavioral plasticity to changes in your environment. So that if something radical happens, you're intelligent enough to be like, all right, let's see, hold on. You'll see your troop of baboons. And you're like, we've got a really bad drought this year. Wait a second. I remember 2 years back when the troop had a different alpha, male and female. We went to this specific watering hole and it had these sort of tubers in the ground that we could feed off of, and it sustained us. So let's go there. It could have to do with memory. It could have to do with sort of predator alarm calls, being able to have this vast verbal repertoire of calls that you and your conspecifics can understand, et cetera, et cetera. So I think no matter what, you got to incorporate the cognitive buffer hypothesis, because primates are ridiculously good at reacting to their surroundings, more so than most mammals, I would say. Of similar size, to be clear. I mean, obviously, a marmoset isn't going to be as good as like a bottlenose dolphin at reacting to their surroundings, but a marmoset's going to be better than anything else of their same size, because
It's going to be better than a sack of potatoes.
Will he be better than dolphin? What if they were both on land? The marmoset would probably be better reacting.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Anyways, that's your answer. Primates have big brains and dexterous hands and feet.
So did they first appear before or after the KT boundary thing?
That's a really, really good question. And there's actually not a solid answer in the literature. What I've seen generally suggests that because mammals had such an explosive radiation after the end Cretaceous, it's probably going to be after. Because obviously arboreality, there weren't very many arboreal mammals during the Cretaceous because there were lots and lots and lots of arboreal predators in the form of dinosaurs and sort of dinosaurian form.
Yeah. Plus, I think before we probably looked a little bit similar to each other.
Yeah, but I mean, more so than we do now, certainly. I mean, we're talking an enormous radiation. Jackson can speak a lot about this since he just studied the Cambrian, but it's like when you've got all those open niches all of a sudden, that's evolution on speed, because everything is just seizing opportunities. I mean, obviously it seems fast in geologic time. It actually occurs quite slowly. I mean, obviously, we don't see evolution in real time in sort of enormous animals. We see them in smaller animals because we don't have huge lifespans.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say after the end Cretaceous extinction. That's what I'm getting. That's what I feel to take from Standing for Truth's sort of toolkit. That's where the trajectory is going.
Gross.
When you breed and live for 2 weeks compared to 20 to 40 years, things happen a little bit faster.
Fair enough. I agree.
So besides the wet nose, dry nose thing, anything other differences between the two subspecies, or not subspecies, but the primates?
Yeah. So when you're dealing with, I'm guessing you mean like the difference between like Strepsirrhines and our sort of Haplorhines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the main difference, interestingly enough, like it used to be social living. But we also have animals like ring-tailed lemurs, which maintain incredible social groups. But then for a while, people were like, well, maybe it's like vocalization complexity, because we see weird vocalizations pop up in the ground monkeys, baboons, geladas, macaques, langurs, colobans, etc. Sorry, but I think really and truly you're looking at a morphology difference. So a lot, I don't want to say all, because I'm not 100% sure. Prosimians aren't necessarily my sort of hone in. I know mostly about the sort of the Haplorhines and the old world monkeys, and the hominids, I guess. Hominoids and hominids. But tooth combs, interestingly enough, most lemurs will have a tooth comb. So it's essentially like 3-on-3 incisors on the bottom like that. And they use so to kind of comb through their fur in sort of affiliative behaviors and things like that. And a lot of lemurs still have what's called a toilet claw, which is a terrible name, but it's essentially sort of a hooked nail on their thumb, which is used, again, for mostly grooming. So little morphologic differences. Also, biggie, prosimians they have a much higher ratio of nocturnal to diurnal individuals. So there are very few members of the Haplorhines who are nocturnal in comparison to the prosimians.
And do we know when the speciation happened between the two? Or we're still not sure?
I think, so again, you're looking at that adapted omomiid split. At least most people would suggest that that's sort of the case, because tarsiers are technically Haplorhines, but they're also kind of barely Haplorhines, if that makes sense. Like
they just made the cut.
Yeah, they make the cut. So again, it's probably, if I remember correctly, I said earlier 30 to 35, but it actually might be 30 to 40 for the adapted omomiid split. Just because, again, it really depends on what you define as sort of a primate, because with those guys, we're dealing with sort of 3 subgroups, right? We're dealing with, or no, wait, that's actually the New World monkeys. Scratch that. It depends. I would say 30 to 40 million years ago. Let me double check. While we're here, might as well. Omomiid split. Please let me be right.
I'll distract him with my juggling abilities.
Yeah, Jackson, talk for a minute. Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, 40 million years ago. Some say early representatives of each of the clades begin around 60 million years ago, but that their actual so like, again, there's this difference between like a speciation time and a divergence time. So divergence is when they sort of start to split with no interbreeding, or with interbreeding rather, and then speciation would be like you can't reproductively
do the do anymore.
That's probably
I mean, you can do the do, but you just want nothing.
It
Will...
doesn't work.
Well, that's probably where ring species come in. You know, the ring slow. I guess
be very careful on how you use that term. Rings, in the classical sense, there are no known ring species, and there probably won't ever be. Because in the classical sense, and Jerry Coyne has railed endlessly about this, the idea of the ring species, as I'm sure you know, but if anyone's watching, they don't know, you have basically a species on one end, and they go around some barrier. It's all backwards, I can see on my camera. They go around a barrier, and by the time they've reconnected with the parental species have reached the starting point again, they can no longer interbreed because they've taken so long and so many genetic differences have built up that they can no longer interbreed. Well, as it stands currently, there are no known perfect examples of that. There are ring species in sort of a loose sense. The Ensatina salamander is one of the most common examples in California because they go around the is that the Death Valley?
I think that's correct, but I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah, I live in Louisiana, so I don't know about them.
I'm a continent away, so.
But they circle, so they start at the top near Oregon, and they go around, but they form clusters in essence. There's a cluster up top, a cluster kind of on the side by Nevada, and then a cluster kind of the bottom to kind of midway up California, because the ones from Oregon kind of went down both ways, and they stopped about midway down California on one side, which towards the Pacific, and on the other side they went all the way around. And so there's limited interbreeding there's interbreeding in these different spaces, but they cluster together. So it's not a perfect ring species, but you can still sort of call it a loose ring species. I think the Laris gulls, there's been some talk about that one. I think that one is kind of the same deal. It's like clusters of interbreeding, or of interbreeding. So yeah, I mean they're neat.
Conceptual boxes, right?
Do what?
They check some of the conceptual boxes. Just they're not considered an ideal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the same with species aggregates and complexes. Things like Heliconius, which is a butterfly from South America. Basically, you have lots and lots of little groups of like incipient Heliconius species who are all kind of living near each other, and they have slight differences. And so if you were to totally separate them, they'd probably form a bunch of different little species, but there's probably still some limited interbreeding going on there. But you're right. It kind of gets back to the heart of, well, what the heck is a species? Because we have these different groups who can interbreed. The thing that I really like, which kind of puts a hole in Kent Hovind's, well, farmers rely on evolution not happening. What I like to think about is...
well, I thought they did. I thought they required happening so they could get bigger crops.
Well, yeah, exactly. They artificially select in particular directions. What is it, Brassica oleracea, which is like the broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower and all that, because they're selecting for different parts of the plant. But with dogs, for instance, if you look at like a Great Dane or a Saint Bernard and a Chihuahua, well, naturally, I mean, unless the Chihuahua ended up as lunch immediately, they're not going to interbreed. Right? There's a mechanical
barrier.
Yeah, there's a mechanical barrier to that whole interaction. So
you're gonna need some creative dogs if you're trying to cross breed.
I wasn't sure not, but I heard if they tried to, the baby would be bigger than. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard the baby would be bigger than the Chihuahua. They tried to do that.
Well, it probably would be. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking. This is terrible, but if you're looking at a male Great Dane and a female Chihuahua, I mean, you're talking about a lot more than just the babies being too large.
There's a lot that's too large in that situation.
Right. The only way that this could happen is with what Jackson said earlier. If you've got a very creative Chihuahua male that immediately is consumed afterwards.
Let's do a test tube baby or
exactly.
Sure.
But at that point, is it a species? Is it the same species though? Because yes, if you were to go with like just a pure molecular genetic perspective where you're just looking at how close the genes are to each other, you'd probably say, yeah, they're the same species. But it's like, okay, you take a step back from that, and you look at the phenotypes. These things can't interbreed. So do we classify them as separate species? And I mean, if we were to just leave them and they go off, in nature and their own separate ways, it's kind of the same with different species where they can interbreed. I would bet the house we can interbreed with a chimp.
Oh, Jackson, interestingly enough, so Kent likes to bring up the Russian scientists with that, and sort of this failed experiments with sort of chimp impregnation. But two main issues with that, which this is horrifying, but as far as I can tell when I looked into it, there is no real reason outside of a singular sort of mechanistic / chemical reason, which is that around the egg of humans, you have of chimpanzees, you have a zona pellucida, which sort of gate checks the sperm. And then, oh yeah, you are or you aren't of the same species. But the thing is that if you bypass the zona pellucida, which stops sort of in humans and in chimps.
Are you going to the hamsters?
Do what?
Is that where you're going with the hamsters?
No. God, no.
Oh, because you can do that. Oh, man.
I'm going with the fact that if you were to sort of a la IVF, take a chimpanzee egg and a human sperm, or unfortunately vice versa, and you were to artificially inseminate to get past the zona pellucida, it's likely that you would get some kind of offspring that would be viable at the point of birth. We're that similar genetically. It's just that little gatekeeping thing. Thank God.
Well, that's there's actually what I was referencing is actually and Georgia Purdom actually pointed me in this direction by accident. With what is it? Fertility tests. One of the fertility tests is you remove the zona pellucida from the egg of, I think it's the Assyrian hamster.
Really?
And we can fertilize it and make it go like, what is it? Like it divides for like, I think it does 2 divisions or something like that, and then
before it terminates.
Yeah, and so is it 1, 2? Okay, maybe 3 divisions. But yeah, that's part of the fertility test. So it's but I mean the experiments back with the 60s with DNA hybridization, because before we could just sequence it, they would take the sequences and they would hybridize them, and that would give a very rough phylogeny. And with that, the chimp, human, and gorilla DNA hybridize so easily, you can't actually tell them apart using DNA hybridization. You can't tell who's more closely related to who, and so you get these polytomies where they're just all equally related to each other.
Well, there is the thing about how our pubic lice is closer to gorilla pubic lice than this to chimp hair lice.
Yeah,
there is that, which is something I actually read a fascinating paper the other day that was talking about it was actually where I was like, oh, right, like speciation and divergence time are really different, because the molecular clock date that you get for the human chimp split is a divergence time. And of course, the paleontological date that you get is a speciation time, weirdly enough, for whatever reason. That's like where we get that 6 to 7 to
because
like
they're factoring in like what do you call it, incomplete lineage sorting and that kind of stuff, right?
Yes, thank you. But they were talking about how long the lineages of both humans and genus Pan would have been able to kind of hybridize, and the estimate actually goes all the way up to like Australopithecus anamensis, which is insane. We're talking like 3-ish million years ago.
Yeah.
And that's both our ancestors being able to hybridize and produce some kind of offspring. So
have you ever heard of is it Eugene McCartney? I think is his name. Okay, so he's this guy. He's this dude. I think he's an anthropologist, but I don't remember. He's either an anthropologist or geneticist. Either way, it won't matter in a second when I tell you who he is. He believes, and he's argued this a number of times, that humans are the offspring of a chimp and pig hybrid.
How
I know.
flattering.
I know, but it's and Donald Prothero's done rebuttals of his stuff. PC Myers. It's hilarious.
Were they even in the same area?
Well, I mean, there are boars in Africa, but it doesn't matter. They're separated by like 80 million years. So
I have seen videos too of wild boars in like Sumatra just absolutely wrecking a tiger's day. You know, I mean, we're talking animals with enormous tusks and that are ridiculously aggressive when they need to be. So I would very much not like to be the chimpanzee that's attempting to make that work.
I mean, you just think about a chimpanzee and he's just in the tree like,
wait a second, hold on.
What's
But
that
he's-
down there?
That boar down there is looking thick.
Oh my god! I actually I was in a hangout with Amanda Glaze and PZ, and I mentioned his name, and she was like, "We don't have to talk about him."
We don't even need to go there.
Yeah.
Oh God, I didn't know the name, but I have heard of the guy who suggested that, and I remember thinking, "Is this a meme?" Like at first, I was like, "Surely not. Surely not."
It's his website is kind of like the guy the reptile heresy or dinosaur heresy guy, or no, pterosaur heresy. That's what he is. The pterosaur. It's like the pterosaur heresy guy. You might bump into his website just by accident because he does so much stuff. You know, he writes articles and draws pictures and stuff. And so just by accident, you bump into, is it David Peters? Is that his name? The pterosaur heresy? Something like that. Anyways, but it's just, and then you're reading his stuff and you're like, oh, this guy seems to know what he's talking about. And you have no idea. He's just a total crank.
Yep. Yeah. That's the most dangerous thing. So it's like, I think this is like a weird area to go into too, but it's like there are a lot of anthropologists out there
compared to what we've been talking about.
I mean, it's similar, weirdly enough, but it's like I almost can't comment because I haven't looked into it enough, which is strange because I love like cryptids and things like that. But like Grover Krantz, excellent anthropologist. He did a lot of work with Neanderthals and things like that. You can actually find his skeleton and that of his Irish wolfhound. I think that was in the Smithsonian, or maybe it's a museum in Germany. Whatever. He's a renowned anthropologist, really, really good guy. Also, big Bigfoot proponent. Like, and so you see.
Wait, I have heard of this guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think you told me about him actually.
I very well might have, because the thing is like the Bigfoot problem in anthropology is like kind of more common than you think, because if you're in anthropology, inevitably someone is going to ask you about it at some point. So inevitably they go deep diving, and then they either come out with this is absolutely ridiculous, or you get Grover Krantz who's like, you know what, maybe.
I remember a few years ago, how long ago it was, when people thought that Bigfoot and the Yeti were speciation things.
They
would have to be real for them to be different species.
People have suggested that, though. You're right. They absolutely have. And, it's so interesting because you get these guys out there, who really do know what they're talking about when they're working in their own field. But at least from the very cursory knowledge that I have, when you see the work that their commentaries on like Bigfoot, there's some very serious leaps that are made that aren't being made in their conventional work.
Creationists, intelligent designers. Tompkins is a geneticist. Jensen is a cell biologist. Andrew Snelling is a geologist. Purdom is a geneticist. They do perfectly fine work when they're working in a lab with normal people. And they're just like, we're going to do the data. We're going to get it out there. It's all going to be fine. No, then they flip the switch and they become a creationist. And suddenly I don't care about the data. It doesn't matter. I've got a narrative. I'm going to push it. And so, absolutely.
I think it's gotta come down to this idea of like, you've got your work box, and then you got your religion box. And as long as those boxes stay as far from each other as possible, they can function. And when they're operating in one box, the other box cannot functionally exist. You know what I mean? Like you can't dabble in both simultaneously. Yeah. So it's a weird situation. I mean,
they when they do try to just go full like research creationist, like Woods or Todd Wood or Kurt Wise. Actually, I got to give them some props though. I kind of they're the closest to being evolutionists that are on the creationist side. They're like they'll be like, yeah, horses evolved from Hyracotherium. Yeah, Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur. Yeah, and they'll just, which is so funny because you listen to Bodie Hodge, who will say like, Archaeopteryx was just a perching bird. It's like,
oh my god, or what's his name? The guy I'm talking about. He's what is his name?
Paduccia?
No, it starts with an M though. Hold on.
Menton.
Daniel Menton.
Oh, funny enough, this is a good time. The book is published. The Rocks Are There is published now by RJ Downard and myself, and you can buy it on Amazon.
Very, very nice. Plugged.
And we wrote a couple of different sections on Menton, and we'll have more in the next volume because he shoots his mouth off on a lot of stuff.
Menton is not qualified to be speaking on any of the things he talks about.
He is actually a cell biologist, and I believe he's got a couple of technical papers to his name. But yeah, no, he's talking about like anthropology, paleontology, all this stuff. And it's like, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah, we're nothing. There are very few things in this world that makes me angrier than the fact, or than specifically the Lucy reconstruction that they have at the Creation Museum / the Ark Park. But in conjunction with that, the fact that there are no zero biological anthropologists who are creationists. And so as a result, they've got people like Georgia Burnham speaking on anthropology. I mean, that's how you know, because you won't find a conventional scientist dare step out of their field with authority. It doesn't happen.
You're right.
Off topic real fast. Forget back to the main topic. Back to dogs real fast. And Russia. I trying to get this in a while ago, but trying to opening. But did you hear? I think this is convergent evolution. Names are still fuzzy, but
sure.
Did you hear about the Russian experiments to make foxes more like dogs?
The silver fox experiment by Belyaev. I actually did a video on that.
So cute.
They basically in selecting the silver foxes with who were more docile, it turns out they had lower adrenocorticoid hormone or whatever. They had lower stress hormones in essence, is associated with the fight or flight response. And as a result, and this is very interesting, as a result of selecting more docile ones, their ears became floppy, their tails wagged, and they just became like dogs. And it's they also developed the coat pattern, which is in domestic animals.
The brindle, double color, things like that.
Is it piebald? How are you pronouncing it?
Yeah, it's piebald. Yeah. There is one that is called piebald that was certainly developed. They also had a higher amount of like retained neonatic features. So it's like they had baby little puppy faces more than sort of the angular adults. So
what is that? Neoteny.
Yeah.
So next will be Great Dane foxes and Chihuahua foxes.
Of course.
Well, I mean, they started with foxes, and they're just bred foxes. But yeah, I did a video on that, and it's actually gonna go for it. Was the one who asked me to do that video way back, and I didn't. It's actually one of the top viewed ones on my channel.
Oh my god, that experiment is one of my favorites. I really like the sort of the fact that you've got this relationship between morphology and docility, right? So it really makes a lot of sense when you think about sort of whether it be intentional at first or not, the domestication of wolves and whether they did it themselves. It's adorable. I love it.
Well, cats probably did it to themselves because they take nothing from no one.
Cats, listen, cats are playing the long con. They know exactly what they're doing. Dogs, I can only speak for my own dogs, who are absolutely incredible blessings upon my life. One of the reasons why I get up in the morning. 2 adorable golden retrievers that are, of course, hundreds of miles away in the United States, but they are total victims of circumstance. My dog Teddy, she wakes up and she has no idea what's happening to her at any given moment. My cat is cold and calculated. He knows absolutely everything about everyone. He's got a long con going. What can I say? I mean, you can see the difference in their eyes almost. Teddy, there's not much going on upstairs. She's cooperative. She's very, very sweet.
Did you ever hear the joke about dogs, cats, and humans?
No, but please tell. I do want to hear it. I love jokes.
And it says dogs look at humans and say, "Hey, this guy takes care of me. He feeds me. He does stuff. He must be a god." Cats are like, "This human takes care of me, feeds me, and takes care of I must be a god."
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
The number of times that I've woken up in my bed, but this was back when I was at home, but when I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would see when I would open my eyes is the green eyes of my cat staring at me face to face, and it would activate my primate brain at its deepest core that's like, this is a Dinofelis about to consume me. I must feed it.
I'm a poor little Australopithecus afarensis.
Yep. And this is, and every once in a while, just to really let him know, I'm like, look, the tables have turned, okay? Like, I'm in charge here. But I'm actually not, because I live to serve.
Well, that's why I believe that's why we eat birds and stuff and chickens and turkeys for revenge against the dinosaurs used to eat our ancestors.
It's all a game of evolutionary tit for tat, is it not?
Yeah, chickens are kind of interesting because they're actually hybrids. They're
jungle fowl and
I think the gray rooster and the jungle fowl or something like that.
I know the jungle fowl is one, but I didn't know the other half.
Yeah, they're kind of interesting, neat little guys. I've actually I went to a zoo and I saw they had a jungle fowl, and I was like, ooh, very pretty birds.
They're gorgeous.
Looks delicious.
Yeah. I saw so when I was in France, I was in a little city in the north called Strasbourg with a colleague of mine and with Luke, and she was like, hey, there's this sort of zoo nearby, and they've got Tonkin macaques. I love macaques, obviously. That's the genus I'm studying. And Tonkin macaques are unique in that they're the most egalitarian of any of the macaque species. We're talking their aggression rate is so low, and they're not like bonobos where they work things out like sexually. They straight up work things out with affiliative behavior. So they're just mega groomers, and they're also super lazy, and they live on like isolated patches of island in Indonesia. So they don't really have to worry about predators or anything. So their sexual dimorphism is also much reduced. So we go to see the Tonkin macaques, and we're looking at them, and they're doing cute things. And a couple of the males start getting in like this little showy argument where they're puffing up at each other, and they're posturing. And it was a blast to watch. And this one little female, she was trying to collect straw. And so she would collect all the straw, and every time a piece would drop, and she was, of course, handling the straw very poorly because she was a juvenile. So the straw would drop, and then she'd stop and pick up all the pieces. And then she'd take like 3 steps, and then more straw would fall, and she'd stop and try to pick up all the pieces. Then this male comes along, and she realizes like she's lower in the hierarchy. She's a juvenile. And so she's like, oh man, I better get rid of this straw fast. So she starts shoving it in her mouth. And it was just very, anthropomorphic behavior, so to speak. So after a little while, we were like, all right, let's go look at some of the other animals. So we go to look at the flamingos, and they house the flamingos and the geese in the same area. And you would think that the flamingos would run the show, but the geese were constantly trying to start a fight. Like they were trying to brawl with every flamingo that was in that entire enclosure. And when the flamingos would go and start, filter feeding kind of, they turn their heads upside down and filter feed the water. The geese would think that they had something valuable and would start charging like with their wings out to the side. Hyper aggressive, super mean. And I was like, you know what? I am so glad they're small, because if we lived in a period where dinosaurs are still quite large and they were like pulling this aggressive macho stuff with each other, and I'm in the way, because I run when I see a goose. Like I don't need to be dealing with, a Parasaurolophus like coming my way, and I'm like, oh my God, get away from me. It was funny. It was just a fun anecdote, because I was like, oh my God, geese are every kind of goose. I thought it was just Canadian geese. These were like sweet European geese. They look cute and they're gray and they seem really nice. And they're not. They're so aggressive.
Yeah, geese are trying to terraform the planet. Don't you know?
I believe it.
I mean, they're gonna do it too. You know?
So,
If any species should succeed us, if it's going to be an all-out brawl between the geese, probably the Canadian geese, but maybe they'll settle things out with the gray European
the
geese.
diapses want to roll back.
Yeah, possibly.
And then the cats, geese, cats. One of them is taking over.
So, what's it back to that? Back to. I love to go all day, but I doubt so you can't be here unless you can see here all night. You might need some sleep, but
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sleep is for the dead.
Yeah. Fair enough as well.
What's the difference between a tarsier and a simiiform?
Tarsiers, more. I mean, so you can get into some of like the nitty-gritty morphologic stuff, which tends to be orbits and sort of the nature of the ankle bones as usual. There's usually a lot of like dentition difference. Like if I remember correctly, I think tarsiers still have 3 incisors. They either have 3 incisors or 3 premolars, and I want to say it's incisors. Whereas anthropoid primates have the same dental formula as we do. So anthropoid primates and simiiforms, they're the same thing. And that your simiiforms or your anthropoid primates is going to include the Catarrhines, which are the old world monkeys, and the Platyrrhines, which are the new world monkeys. And they're differentiated by like their nostrils primarily.
Yeah.
But tarsiers, I think more specifically, again, if I remember correctly, it has to do with whether or not the orbit is entirely closed in the back. Because I believe tarsiers still have a little bit of an opening. I'm not 100% positive, but interestingly enough, their brain size to body ratio is still less than what we see in the anthropoids. Then once you get to the anthropoids, it stays relatively consistent until you get to the hominoids, which are like your apes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it stays relatively consistent, excluding humans, as you move up the sort of the hominin tree. So you can kind of make these. It's almost weirdly enough like you've got these little hops and then plateaus, and then hops, and then plateaus. And then what we're seeing now is sort of the result of that initial radiation. But I believe it's the orbits. And then, of course, obviously, if you want to talk behaviorally, tarsiers are mostly solitary. They've kind of abandoned the group living thing. But that's not to say that they didn't have it in the past. It could be, it's kind of like we consider orangutans, right, modern orangutans, to be semi-solitary, but it's a recent adaptation because orangutans probably, I think the estimate is like 20,000 years ago, used to lead a much more social lifestyle. And they still retain remnants of that because females will tolerate other females to a degree and males won't. So it kind of suggests that they used to lead a lifestyle that was more one male group, polygynous society, right? Something we would see in like gorillas. But then you've got, of course, the vastly different lifestyles of pretty much every single old world monkey, most new world monkeys, and of course the genus Pan. And then you've got the outliers in like the gibbons and some of the new world monkeys, which are pair bonded. And so the question is, where does pair bonding come into this? Because you can make these different categorizations. We tend to do it morphologically and phylogenetically, but of course there's behavioral uniqueness that exists, God, within species, let alone within genera or sort of across families.
As for the, sorry.
I will ramble. You got to stop me.
Yeah. As for the next split, I used to make a joke before that some simiiforms were betting other simiiforms. Hey, I bet you can't jump over that to the other limits over there, over to South America. Like, oh, you want to bet on that? Sure. So they go jumping over there, and the speciation between Carolines and Platyrrhines.
Yeah, it's interesting. The sort of rafting event occurred when we still have these. I say 3, but it turns out when I was actually researching, there's a 4th that existed when I was learning this back in 2016, but to a lesser degree. And we don't cover nearly as much fossil stuff, sort of in the course that I'm taking now as I did in human evolution. But the New World primates, you kind of have these 4 groups, right? You've got the oligopithecids, the parapithecids, the propliopithecids, and the proteopithecids. So one of these 4 groups in this initial radiation that occurred before your kind of Saudi Arabia and African combined plate smashes into Europe, you've got this massive radiation in what is now Egypt, which is why we find most of these fossils in the Fayum, which used to be this lush, beautiful tropical jungle along what would become the Nile. So this rafting event was kind of strange, right? Because what we essentially see is far less radiation and species differences among the Platyrrhines than we do among the Catarrhines. And one of the reasons I've seen proposed for that is twofold. One has to do with the pressures that have to, with like habitat pressures, because obviously if you're rafting over where we see the primates that exist today in North America, it's all jungle. You don't have a single primate, to my knowledge, that lives in South America that is a ground monkey, which is vastly different than what we see in Asia and in Africa, where we see this enormous radiation, both in the trees with your colobins and sort of your langurs, but especially on the ground with the baboons and macaques, and to a lesser extent now, but the therapithecids. So what we see now, the gelada baboons. They're not actually baboons, but they behave enough like them that we refer to them as such. But your main difference between your Catarrhine and your Platyrrhine, we're Catarrhines because our nostrils open down, and a Platyrrhine's nostrils open to the side. Also, interestingly enough, Catarrhines tend to score much better on most of our sort of cognitive tests for whatever reason. They don't necessarily have that much larger of a brain to body mass ratio. They do in some cases, but certainly not as much as you would expect given how recent their split was. But then again, rhesus macaques and all the macaques that we've tested pass the mirror test, but baboons don't.
Yeah.
So it all depends on where the pressures lie. Even even over in the old world, right, quote unquote, there are differences amongst species that are even geographically adjacent. It for all intents and purposes doesn't make any sense. But we also didn't witness the same pressures, or witness the pressures that were impacting each of these groups. And
besides the nose thing, plus they get the cool, useful tails. And we need to have tails. Ours is pretty much like.
I know it's so sad. But to be fair, some of your New World monkeys, like for instance the spider monkeys, lost their opposable thumbs in favor of that super prehensile tail. They've got these itty bitty little nubbins left for thumbs that are essentially functional, which is so sad for them. But at the same time, spider monkeys are really cute, so they won it in a different category.
Spider monkeys, like, makes you think of 8-legged monkeys.
I know, that would be even cooler, but unfortunately
that would be absolutely terrifying. What are you talking about?
No. That's the only monkey trait, or the only spider trait they have. The rest is all monkey. They don't get the chelicera.
Ugh. Oof.
So, New World monkeys. Is there a theory now that they all came? One or two came and speciated there, or was there several speciation? Several migrations.
As far as the literature that I read this year goes, I think according to the genetic kind of look-see that we've had, we're looking at a single rafting event, because all of those Platyrrhines are close enough to one another that even if it was 2 rafting events, they would have to be in very quick succession, and those populations likely would have interbred. So theoretically, it could be 2. But it doesn't really matter. Functionally, there's one major event, so to speak.
So that was the true Noah's Ark then.
Yeah.
And it's not even the only, or the Platyrrhines aren't the only ones who are hypothesized to have rafted. You also have the Hystricognath rodents, the group that includes like guinea pigs and those guys. They also have an ancestor who rafted.
What is their Oh, they're called something else. It starts with a P. You know what I'm talking about? Bush pig, sort of.
Yes.
You know what
yeah. Caviomorphs is the other. Well, that's the other a big name for their group.
Hold on. Pigs in South America.
You're talking about peccaries?
Peccaries. That's what I'm talking about. Peccaries.
Oh well, peccaries are suids.
Okay, so I'm wrong on that then.
I mean, guinea pigs are rodents. Peccaries are.
Oh, no, I didn't hear the guinea part. I thought you were talking about pigs in general.
Oh
And
no,
know the taxonomy of
no, I'm sorry, my bad. My internet
on
is
me. It's totally on me. I know primate taxonomy very well, and I know every other taxonomy poorly.
well. Peccaries actually have a very interesting evolutionary history. They separated from pigs also in the old world, but they probably came to North America through the Bering Strait.
Oh yeah, by land. I thought it was interesting that you were like, yeah, they rafted over, and I had this image of these
You're like, what?
large
No,
pigs, and I was like,
no.
okay, damn, all right.
No, the history cognath rodents a little because the New World porcupines are convergent. They're not part of the porcupine group of the African porcupines.
That actually makes quite a bit of sense because they
got the tail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so the caviomorphs, but they also have like the world's largest rodents, like
Capybara.
Well, yeah, and also in the fossil record, you have like Josephoboromes, which were like the size of a smart car, and so yeah.
Oh yeah. They're like oh what's the one? It's like a wombat. Like they're similar in size to, I think, like Diprotodon, right? The big marsupial from Australia.
Probably were. Yeah, I mean they probably were about that. I don't know what the exact size for Diprotodon.
It's big. It's like you said, smart car, and the first thing that came to mind. They've got this excellent specimen at the Natural History Museum here in London, and every time I see it, I'm like, man, that thing's the size of a car.
So how?
Yeah, Diprotodon was actually a migrational marsupial. Interestingly enough.
So how,
that I believe. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, marsupial. Yeah, we could get a whole different. We could get a whole different, like a whole series of this at this point. But how close? How do you know how close South America and Africa were during this thing, or like close they are now, or a lot closer?
I couldn't tell you the exact numbers. I mean,
as it happens, the estimates for how long it would have taken for them about 30 million years ago or so, the estimates are it would have taken like 8 to 15 days.
So not too bad.
Yeah, so like 2 weeks at very max.
I imagine the currents were at least slightly different then as well.
And they were. Yep. The wind, the water currents, how that was affected because they were closer together. Yep. There's a paper from I think the 80s which kind of outlines the whole what is the most reasonable hypothesis for how Platyrrhines got to South America.
The probable route, yeah. It's interesting as well because it would it's very unlikely that there was a single rafting event that was successful, and very likely that there were several due to local conditions, and that a lot weren't successful.
Yeah. I mean, if they take to the sea.
Oh God, yeah. Poor Australopithecus and company. All these little small, early-looking guys. So sad.
So what was the next thing besides the new monkeys was the old world and the apes saying goodbye to each other?
Well, interestingly enough, you've also got to deal with two other small splits. You have to deal with the split between your Asian monkeys and your African monkeys. So it's kind of a perfect situation because the ground monkeys that lived in ancient Africa, in northern Africa, so Egypt, the Fayum, they kind of had this perfect opportunity to radiate up north, sort of northeast out into Asia, as well as down south. And that's where you get that split between your macaques and your genus Papio. So macaca and Papio, the baboons and the macaques. And then kind of related to Papio, you have these enormous baboons, the Therapithecids. Only living relative today, again, are the geladas, but they would have been incredibly large. Like we're talking not quite a smart car, but you're getting there. You've got some very large monkeys, largest monkeys that ever lived, as far as I know. Still smaller than like Gigantopithecus blacki, which was the largest ape.
He's a big one.
Yeah, huge, enormous, but still very big. And because we're dealing too with an animal that is likely sexually dimorphic, the males that were the male Therapithecus or Therapithecids would have had canines like daggers. I mean, we're talking huge canines. If you've seen a mandrill's canines today, I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with them. I wouldn't. And then you've also got the split between both the radiation that spreads north and the radiation that spreads south, sort of out into Africa, into your arboreal monkeys, the ones like your sort of colubids and things like that, as well as the ones that kind of hang out in both, more so than the baboons do, so like vervet monkeys and things like that. They actually have bright blue genitals. If you're interested, it's very weird. And then the macaques do something similar. And then at last, we see the split, this in the Miocene, actually, a true planet of the apes, because the Miocene is absolutely littered with apes. If today is the age of the monkeys, that's when we're dealing with the most different kinds of apes. And they were some of them were really quite strange. You've got some very large gibbon forms. You've got weird, almost like apes that had feet that would be almost more similar to us than they would have been to say modern chimpanzees and like Australopithecus, which it's still the jury's kind of out, but their feet are certainly more adapted for a terrestrial lifestyle, which is very, very strange. You've got, of course, a radiation of apes that ends up also going to Asia, where you get Gigantopithecus blacki, which is like, or Gigantopithecus, depending on what you say, which is basically a gigantic orangutan. Yeah. I mean, enormous orangutan.
Yeah, this chart's kind of simplified. It probably show the branches, the filled branches on here too, most likely.
Oh yeah. And the thing is that it's like, obviously there's way less known about, unfortunately, about our radiation of the apes than the hominids, because people inherently want to know more about us, not so much about the other apes that ran the show during the Miocene. And then, of course, once we see the hominoids, that's when we get some of the cool guys, right? The modern hominoids are gorillas, orangs, gibbons, and ourselves, and genus Pan. So, and we all represent wildly different social lifestyles, which is really interesting.
So what makes a great ape better than a smaller gibbon ape?
In my opinion, nothing. I think that calling the gibbons the lesser apes is very mean, and that we should switch it to like the mimi apes or something like that, because by and large gibbons are incredibly successful. I mean, if we're talking about just the sheer diversity of all members of the hominoids, they kind of got us beat. I mean, the gibbons are excellent. They've got incredibly complex vocal duets. Some of them are pair bonded, which is really interesting. The brachiation unmatched in the animal kingdom. And then, of course, you've got my personal favorite of the gibbons, which is the Simang, which has those big frog-like throat pouches. So they just make funniest noises. I love them.
So which gibbon gave you your name?
My gibbon is based off of it's an imaginary kind of gibbon, of course. It's a gut sick gibbon, so it's perpetually got a stomach ache. That's why I drink so much tea. But my gibbon is based off of the classic lar gibbon, except it's blue. So yeah. I love lar gibbons. They're very cute as well, though.
There could be blue fossil gibbons. Think about that.
We don't know. That incomplete fossil record gives me the gibbon of.
So when I was reading the Ancestor's Tale, there's like through gibbons and everything. There's talking about two theories. One, they left Africa, the species on their own. The other one is we all left Africa and then we came back to Africa.
Yeah, I think. Honestly, I think that we see a great radiation of apes, of course, in the Miocene that ends up in Europe and areas like this. But I think that your sort of multi-regional out of Africa hypothesis is probably what we're leaning towards, with the exception of maybe the orangs leaving sort of at the tail end of the Miocene. But it really depends, because you don't exactly find a trail, like a trail of fossils leading you out that way, unfortunately, just because of how things change.
But what if they were on the Ark?
Oh, shit. What if they were?
What if they were on the Ark?
We can't prove that wasn't what happened.
Plus,
except for all the ways we can.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't for, too bad that all the natural was always nice to fossilize and no predators ate the bones and stuff. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the world of taphonomy can be a fool's game sometimes, of course.
There's a line, one of my favorite lines from all the Dawkins books is in The Greatest Show on Earth, where he says, if anyone has a right to complain about the lack of missing links, it's the chimpanzees.
I know, and instead we're left in the position where we're like, chimps, they didn't change that much, and yet they're still grossly unique from when compared to, like, say, Helanthropus, with their own unique. I mean, really and truly, you want to talk about the what makes chimpanzees, what makes genus Pan so unique is the fact that you've got a Congo split of the chimps and the bonobos, like 2 million years ago, 1.5, and how impeccably different they are. And the reason they're so different is because they're so intelligent, and they've managed, intelligent, I know is a relative term, but they're so cognitively capable that they've managed to come up with unique solutions to similar problems. See, I mean, we're talking about convergent evolution on, like, a social scale, which is really, really cool. Or rather, sorry, not convergent evolution on a social scale. Completely unique means of structuring themselves. You've got chimpanzees, which are like masters of tool use, and bonobos fail rather miserably, at least out in the wild with that. But they completely outperform chimps when it comes to cooperation. So it's like you've got these totally unique animals that are so similar morphologically, barely split from each other. We're talking infancy here. It's incredible. You've got you've got patriarchal tendencies in the chimps and matriarchal tendencies, as Franz de Waal, who's a famous primatologist, put it. The bonobos are a gynocracy.
Yeah.
That's just how they roll, and it's very strange. You've got, of course, heavily sex-based versus heavily violence-based, although it has been challenged that the bonobos are actually frequently as violent as the chimps. They just also like to have a lot of sex. So who knows how that goes? Unfortunately,
the bonobos are the dominatrix of the.
Oh yes, actually, I was reading this. What is her name? She's a really good primatologist. I think it's Mary something, but she's been studying bonobos for her entire career, and she brought to my attention some quite disturbing kind of reverse of what we see in chimps, where coercion occasionally occurs. So basically, male chimps can heckle females until they're like, all right, fine, and then they copulate. And female bonobos will do the same thing to male chimps, where they will actually occasionally get their sisters and their nieces and their female relatives to come in and gang up on this poor male, and they're hitting on him and biting on him until finally he's like, fine, whatever. And so it's just it's horrifying. I mean, you see the two sides of the same coin, and it's terrible either way. But on the other hand, it's very interesting to see these totally unique social behaviors, and they're just one river away from each other. It's wild.
Right. Yeah, it's like when people say, like, oh, dolphins are so cute, otters are so cute. These guys have rape gangs.
They are total rapers. And the thing is that the more intelligent an animal gets, you start to see some rapey tendency, except with elephants. I mean, but elephants are also a matriarchy that isn't sex-focused. So it's like with bonobos, there's that rapey aspect, but it's focused in the favor of the female. So, intelligence doesn't really lend itself to consent very well in our intelligent animals.
If you have ever seen, like, Stefan Molyneux's tweets, then yeah, I think we're still working on it.
Oh, believe me, I have. And the thing that gets me more than anything is when people try to use primates to kind of justify that kind of drive, so to speak, because and usually they do so by being like, males are much stronger than females are on average, and so they can't help it that they use their strength, so manly, to take what they want, and then I simply point to the old world monkeys, of which the vast majority are highly sexually dimorphic, and of which the vast majority of the males will get severely injured if they try to coerce a female, because they also happen to be female philopatric, which means the females stay in their natal group and form tight-knit bonds and will gang up on males that they dislike. And that includes rescuing, quote-unquote, conspecifics if they feel like they're being heckled. So there's a specific paper that I was reading about how coercion happens in chimps and coercion of the opposite kind happens in bonobos, but it doesn't happen in macaques because macaques will gang up on each other. And I thought that was really interesting. It was just kind of like, they don't tolerate that. So it really comes down to unique primate societies tackle reproduction and interspecific or intersexual rather relationships in totally different ways. And there's quite a bit to suggest, at least in the case of humans, that our most recent ancestors were quite egalitarian in how they sort of organized themselves, and that as monogamy was on the rise, that perhaps those two things had something to do with one another. But it's speculative at this point. This is behavior based.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the branch we have now, but there's evidence now of a European branch of apes. I'm not sure that would branch off here.
Yeah. That would be in the Miocene. So we actually have a ton of apes in the Miocene that are hanging around in Europe, which is really, really cool. And it sucks because the farthest north ape, other than humans, is going to be your Barbary macaque, Macaca sylvestrina, or sylvestris rather. And they live in the Strait of Gibraltar, so they're so close to being in Europe, like technically. I love them. Is that a cat on you, Jackson?
Yes, it is. This is Enzo. He's on everything.
Is that the one that's in your thumbnail?
Yeah, who I have around my neck like a prize. Yeah, here he is.
Oh, he's so handsome. Look at
I
him.
know.
Is he like? It's like, why are you ignoring me? Feed me now.
Yeah, that is exactly what he's like. My cat is somewhere in the States having a psychotic episode. I think he was traumatized when he was young, so he's quite an odd bird, so to speak.
A cat is an odd bird. Ha.
He would be offended, but he's not here. No one tell him.
Yeah, Enzo likes to come in here when I'm doing streams because he's a nosy cat. Yes, he is.
He doesn't like giving attention to things that aren't him.
He's like, hey, I'm the star of this channel. Show me more.
Yep, that's him for sure. That's
you should just have the camera on him and you talk off screen.
Well, they're so. I read this very, very funny post. I think it was either on Twitter or on Tumblr. If it was on Tumblr, it was reposted on Twitter, which is where I saw it.
I forgot Tumblr existed. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Tumblr has not had a great time since they did that not safe for work ban on content some time ago.
I remember that. Yeah.
They forget that like most of their base was there for that kind of content.
There are other places for that.
Yeah.
Other places that specialize in that, by the way.
There are. I've heard of them. I would never indulge.
Of course not. No one would ever.
No one would ever. It was this tweet that was like, my cat won't drink any water. And so to keep him hydrated, what I do is I fill up a cup of water and I drink from it, and then I leave it on the table so that he thinks it's mine and knows that it's safe to drink. So he'll get up and drink from it because he thinks he's being naughty. And it was like, that's the only way I can keep him hydrated is by making him think he can't have it. And then someone was like, God at people in the Garden of Eden. And then someone was like, what the fuck are the implications for this? I'm sorry, I swore again. My bad.
That's pretty funny.
And I thought that was funny. I was like, that's, perhaps I'm just spitballing here, but perhaps that's what some of the ancient people groups who perpetuated the story were going for. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's part of it is and again I believe it was in The Greatest Show on Earth where Dawkins mentions like we have an inherent tendency to categorize things, and so what does Adam do? He names everything.
Yep.
That's an inherent tendency
of humanity.
Of people. Yeah, and so it's kind of neat.
But how do you know all those Latin names? Name them.
Exactly. Yeah, like
he's a big
1,000 years before Latin came out. Well, you have to remember all the people came from him. So.
Oh, true. Fair enough. That is.
Well, wait, no, I just remembered because it was God who came up with all the languages when he scattered the people at Babel. So.
Maybe it's just me, but honestly, as someone who is outside looking in on creationism, of course, for some reason I always find it so much more jarring when the Tower of Babel is referred to as like an actual event than like Noah's Ark or creation. it catches me off guard because I never talk about it. And then they'll be like, oh, well, that happened after Babel. And I'm like, whoa. Like, I feel it like knocks me out of my body because it's just such a strange thing to lump in with the history.
What could happen at any time? Because like any speciation event, you probably different like species like birds, they could probably speciate their languages too. That's why they don't tweet to each other anymore.
I like that idea. Oh God, I can't even imagine that would probably be quite awkward amongst the poor bird species. I actually read somewhere that the idea of the Tower of Babel. Where did I read this? Maybe it was like, I don't think it actually was John Walton. I think I read it somewhere else, but that the Tower of Babel is sort of rooted in the fall of the Babylonian Empire, sort of after the captivity. Because what was originally like a very academically based society where there were, of course, tutors, and they taught cuneiform in certain halls of scholars or whatever it is that they called them back then. As the empire began to fall, they could no longer afford to keep these places up, and of course, there was a great loss of knowledge. And at that same time, I think, is when the Hebrews were sort of freed from the Babylonian captivity. Yeah. So they would have borne witness to that, I believe.
It's the Noachian flood, I believe, is based on, well, the place where they lived was the Iraqi floodplain. So
shocking.
Yeah, off topic about the history real fast. I always wonder what would happen if the two quote dark ages, the fall of the Bronze Age and the fall of the Roman Empire, never happened. How regressed science or history progress we'd be right now. Those two dark periods never happened.
I think it's a wonder that we're even where we are, considering, like, I can't help but think that since humans, anatomically modern humans, and of course Neanderthals have been around for quite a bit longer, if you're including Neanderthals, than 300,000 years, that there have got to be some periods that due to circumstance, the fall of an empire, the burning of Alexandria type, events where there's a great loss of knowledge for whatever reason. There had to have been a couple of events like that kind of pushed back that agricultural revolution. But obviously that's totally speculation. There's no way of knowing that. I just think that, I don't know.
I like to think that the Adamic story is an allegory of the transition from hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a sedentary city-based lifestyle.
It very well could be. I remember reading in, I think it was Sapiens, that the agricultural revolution is like secretly one of the worst things to happen to like human well-being, because you go to this lifestyle that was spent socializing and in affiliative behavior and very, very little actual hunting and gathering in order to maintain sort of
before you need others to survive. Now, not like, okay, you take this job, I'll take this job, and never.
Yeah, and you're working constantly to cultivate the crop for the next year instead of moving around where the food goes, kind of. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like hunter-gatherers kind of had a good gig. That's why they did it for so long, one might propose.
I mean, you think it happened about 10,000 years ago is the agricultural revolution. When do creationists say the world started?
It's possible. I'm just saying it could happen.
I like that. Like people are like, instead of following these animals, why don't we just try to trap them here and keep them here?
Well, there are some there. Interestingly, it appears that there are different sites where other hominins would leave tools on their migratory routes. So whenever they got back to that same spot next year, hey, the spears are already there.
Yeah. And I believe if I remember correctly, you can actually trace, the three sort of stages of tool advancement. And you can kind of trace it out in such a way from sort of the original basic Neolithic toolkit. And you can kind of spread it out in such a way that you can almost see like information transfer going on and like teaching and the sharing of knowledge and things like that with neighboring groups. Or then all of a sudden you find these tools where you didn't previously. Which is so interesting that humans that early on were like, you can imagine, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes and they're like, oh wow, like that's a lot of game you guys have. And they're like, well, we're using this new kind of sling They're like, oh, sick. Well, we'll trade you, 100 spears if you'll teach us how to do it. And then they're like, oh, yeah, why not? What's the harm in that?
That kind of reminds me of the on Family Guy. These fish come out of the water, and they see their friend the fish is on land, and they're like, "Hey, where have you been?" And he says, "Oh, I went for a run." They're like, "Is that anything like a swim?" No, it is not.
There's another one on like the Family Guy skit on like the domestication of dogs, and he's like, hey, like two wolves, and he's like, I'm gonna go over there and like be friends with this guy, and he's like, oh, why? And he's like, I'm gonna see if I can get him to pick up my poop. And it's like,
they
got us. They got us all right.
And that's how it happened.
That's how it happened.
There was the episode, the Cosmos, the Neil deGrasse Tyson episode of Cosmos. It's like the second or third episode, something like that. Is evolution, and he uses the domestication of dogs as kind of the segue into it. And he's like, Neil deGrasse Tyson's like at a campfire, and these wolves are circling, and it's like the funniest thing because he grabs one of the logs in the fire and like swings it to scare them off, and then later a dog comes along, and I was just like,
God,
what is going on here?
There's a new theory that, or hypothesis, I always get this confused, but that hypothesis that maybe dogs domesticated themselves first before we even did a thing. That they started eating our trash and stuff, coming closer to human things.
Yeah, that actually is at least what I found to be when I was researching for my video on it, was like the sort of the dominant idea right now is that it was kind of like dogs started hanging out close to camps, and because the docile ones would not get killed by the humans, because obviously they wouldn't attack, and humans, you know how we are. We like cute things, and I can't imagine it was too much different back in the day. I mean, if a canid comes up to you,
like he's not bothering us, so it's not bothering him.
Yeah, it's not bothering you. You're like, whatever. But then they realized the utility in keeping a dog around the camp. Early warning for predators, just an extra set of eyes almost. And then that was kind of like, well, okay, now instead of tolerating, we'll sort of, they enter into this period of like appreciation, which is a huge step, the tolerance versus sort of appreciating them, and then eventually intentionally keeping them around. I mean, it's certainly nothing like what you see in like the movie Alpha, which came out a couple of years ago. But I did love it.
I did not.
You didn't like it?
I didn't see it.
I think the last dog movie I saw was the one where it got reincarnated every year until
the dog's purpose.
For
I knew that was going to be sad. The thing is, I can tolerate dog movies as long as I feel like I can anticipate whether or not the dog's going to kick it at the end. Because ever since I made that mistake with Marley and Me as a child, which was, by the way, advertised as a cute, happy-go-lucky dog film, I refused to make it again. Except when I did flying home to the United States for Christmas, and I saw The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is also a very sad movie and almost exactly like Marley and Me. And I had to be consoled by my seatmate who was like, "They're there."
Let me introduce you to this film. It's called Old Yeller.
Old Yeller, I'll one up you. Where the red fern grows. Both of the dogs die. Spoiler for anybody who hasn't read Where the Red Fern Grows, by the way.
So
yeah.
Back to our family. So I guess next gorillas decide to leave us and get a lot buffer.
They do, and mostly, interestingly enough, anytime you see like jacked primates, you can usually find the culprit, usually, not always, the culprit in male competition. So anytime you have sexual dimorphism, which of course you see in gorillas and in orangutans to relatively extreme degrees, it's because the males are competing with one another to maintain control over a harem of females. Now, don't misconstrue when I say maintain control, and of course this is less so in orangutans now, because they lead mostly solitary lives, but like I said earlier, very recent.
So that's a sexual selection thing?
Yeah, kind of. It's actually more of a habitat fragmentation thing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, in gorillas, it's actually, there's some very sad but funny videos on YouTube about, males that essentially fight one another to maintain control of this group of females. And if the females just decide they like the new male better, they'll just leave. And there's nothing that the old male can do about it other than try to appear very fit and appear very powerful. But if that doesn't work, they'll just go with the new male. So it's as much sort of maintaining the peace with your females as it is fending off other males.
Then he joins Twitter and becomes an incel.
Exactly. Listen, let me tell you about the most incel primates out there are Hamadryas baboons. First, bonobos and Tonkin macaques are like an incel's nightmare because it's like the reverse of what they want. It's like total, as DeWall put it, gynocracies. But then you've got like the Hamadryas baboons, which are just like straight up incels. Like we're talking like, and I see things like Hamadryas baboons, and I think to myself, because what you've got very tight-knit groups of males that maintain control over groups of females by not allowing them to stay with their relatives. So they discourage like female philopatry, and they actually will trade females between harems and nip and bite at them and physically threaten them if they don't kind of sort of fall into line. And the females don't really have a defense for this because for whatever reason, when coalition formation amongst the females and those tight-knit bonds was prevented whenever it was millions of years back, or probably millions, maybe a million years back, it essentially stopped them from having a response to this, like a sort of a retaliation. And I always see this and I'm like, incels point to Hamadryas baboons as like this excellent pinnacle of society, not knowing that like 1 out of every 100 males gets to have a harem and the rest spend their entire lives on the outskirts, never breeding, never passing on their genetics, and dying alone, just like real life. You just switch animals. It's the same situation. If you can't be a buff Chad Hamadryas baboon, you're not going to breed. That's just how it works. And the ironic part is you'd be much better off if sex is what you're after. You'd be much better off being a bonobo because they're constantly doing it, right. And everybody gets to join in. So incels are a weird situation, and Hamadryas baboons incidentally are some of my least favorite primates because there's not a real, even in bonobos, like males aren't, like it's not a situation like in Hamadryas baboons where like the lowest male is still higher than the highest female in a harem. It's like, let's say you're a high up female and you have a son, he's going to rank pretty high in the troop overall.
Yeah.
Like he's still not going to get to feed first or anything like that, but like his mom and all her sisters are going to like come and back him up if he gets in a fight. So it's like, it's not the worst place to be. It could be worse. Like you'd rather it'd be better to be a male bonobo than a female Hamadryas baboon. Let's put it that way.
Unlike hyenas.
Unlike hyenas. You don't want to be a male hyena, period.
You don't want to be a hyena, period.
That's fair enough. All that power comes at a price, and that price is called giving birth near or through a pseudopenis. Like it's just not.
I was gonna say their face, but yeah, that works too.
Yeah, I think some hyenas are kind of cute. I like the aardwolves. They're adorable.
Oh my god, you went for the worst one.
No, they're sweet. They're sweet in like an.
That's like saying pugs are cute. They're just ugly.
And the thing about pugs is that, so I do think some ugly dogs are cute, but pugs I can't get over the not breathing thing. It's like I don't.
They just like they just kind of look up and they're
like, these noses are on their way. Let's make their noses flatter.
I swear to God, I'm one of the heaviest sleepers in the world. Like first of all, I can fall asleep incredibly easily. Like I would have been the member of the tribe that like gets eaten by a predator because everyone else wakes up when the predator shows up, and I'm just like, I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah, me too. One time when I was still at church camp, what happened? We were sleeping. We had such an alarm system set up, and some of these girls snuck in and set the alarm off. And the rest of my cabin got up and sprayed her with shaving cream, and I slept through the whole thing.
Yeah, you were like, I'm not dealing with it. Yeah. I used to dog sit as a side gig when I was in my undergraduate. So I would I worked through Rover, which was like an app where you could like dog sit. And I had this regular client. He was this really overweight pug. I'll protect his identity instead of calling him his real name. We'll call him Clarence.
The dog was the client. I like it.
We'll protect both. He was so sweet. I swear to God, I woke up 20 times in one night because this dog would start getting sleep apnea in the middle of the night and like snorting, and I'd be like, oh my God, the dog's dying. And then he'd start breathing again, after, and with this very, very pitiful sounding snort. He was an absolute mess. He was a sweet, sweet dog, but those brachycephalic skulls are just an abomination. Like, someone needs to legislate that because it is not fair. I worked under a veterinarian, and she said, so I don't know if you guys probably know this, but like, you intubate animals like when you're putting them under so that they don't stop breathing and die. And when you and when you intubate brachycephalic dogs, right? Like, when an animal is coming to, you leave the intubation tube in until they start like kind of coughing on it, so that you know that they're awake enough to breathe on their own. And then you pull the intubation tube out and they hack a couple times. They're fine. Pugs and French bulldogs will actively resist you pulling the intubation tube out because
they're like, air.
And it is sad. I was like, "Are you?" I thought it was a joke, and she was like, "No, I'm not joking. I'm serious."
Like air, let me breathe.
I like for the first time ever.
That reminds me of, you paid this woman to sit on babies? I do it for free.
I do it for free. I'll do it for free now.
That was from Jim Carrey, The Cat in the Hat. Oh my God.
Speaking of things that need legislation against them.
But yeah, see on babies used to be a thing that everyone did because of the eggs. So now we don't do that anymore. Now.
Fair enough. Yeah, you don't want to sit on any babies. That's especially human babies are particularly.
It's socially frowned upon or something like that.
Yeah, it's against our. It's a taboo, so to speak.
So there are two branches of gorillas, or.
I mean, so the thing with gorillas, it's a little bit similar to bonobos. I believe that branches. I mean, it depends on if you're talking about species versus genera, because I believe there's only one genera that's extant. In fact, I'm like 99% sure, but I believe that there are separate species. Like, you've got the lowland gorilla and the western gorilla.
And mountain gorillas.
Maybe.
Gorilla species.
You
have gorilla and gorilla.
Yeah, eastern and western. Okay, so they're very, very similar. But I think they're actually more similar than chimps and bonobos were or are. I think they're more closely of a split off. You have to forgive me, you guys. I've got macaques on my brain more than anything right now.
You should know everything. Why do you not know everything?
I know.
You're my only primate expert.
Yeah.
TD Lane, I can only half agree with you on that one.
Do what?
I said TD Lane says babies do not make good seating. I can only half agree with you on that one.
They make good pillows. They're soft.
If they're chunky, yeah. They
Some of them are really chunky, though.
They don't grab your hair. That's why I used to cut my hair short. My mom used to be a foster parent, so I always kept my hair short so the babies couldn't grab it.
That's a smart play. The thing is I love baby monkeys. I love baby chimps. I love pretty much every baby primate. Human primates kind of scare me a little bit. It's an uncanny valley kind of thing. I've seen cute babies. There are some babies out there where they are genuinely adorable, but I would say 80% of babies are hideous for like most of their baby time.
You think yours would be hideous if you ever had any?
When I was a baby, I was absolutely hideous. Yes.
I mean, if you ever had a baby.
I mean, I would probably think it's cute because I wouldn't be able to fight my maternal. My evolution would force me to think my own child was cute, so that I would actually.
You're evolutionarily predisposed.
Like this thing's ugly. Put it back.
If genetics have anything to say about it, though, I would know in the back of my head. I would be like, "Yo, this baby is ugly." I think it's cute, but no one else thinks it's cute. When I came out, I looked like I set a record at the hospital I was born at for being the longest baby, and my body fat was like 2%. I looked like a little old man skeleton Benjamin Button coming out. It was horrifying. And you want to know how I know that?
Tells me.
Oh, go ahead.
How do you know that?
No, you go ahead.
No. I want to hear it first.
I had the pleasure of watching this past Christmas when I was home. My mom was like, let's watch home videos. That sounds great. I had the pleasure of watching my own birth video, which was very traumatic. So what are you gonna do? It's
here's me as a baby.
Oh.
That's cute. That's not baby. That's like, it's baby, but it's a toddler baby.
I only have a baby picture since I was adopted, so I don't have any really baby pictures.
Oh, like a super baby picture. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not showing any baby. I was also perpetually angry, so weird deal.
My mom tells me that the other nurse just thought I was a girl.
And you're like, wait a second. Mom, what does that mean?
Stop. Wait a minute. Yeah.
Hold up. Oh, man. Ooh.
But for bonobos and chimps, is the only reason they speciated because they didn't like swimming, or?
Pretty much, yeah. We're talking about a geographic isolation that basically spurred behavioral differences and like slight morphology differences. They're really, really closely related. I don't know if anybody's actually checked, but I would imagine almost certainly that they could produce viable, like fertile offspring. That's how close we're talking. But I don't know if any. It'd be a weird deal. I think they'd probably tear each other apart before anything romantic would happen.
Be like Great Danes and Chihuahuas.
They'd be like, I think it'd be like the divorce court. Like the women were like, women was like, hey, I'm in charge. The male chimp's like, no, I'm in charge.
I imagine you would have both. If you had a female bonobo and a male chimp, you would have the two of them trying to both coerce each other, and it would get dicey fast.
That'd be pretty rough.
Yeah, things would be lost, and the bonobo got the upper hand. Probably testicles would as well, because as I'm sure they do that.
I wonder if the opposite would happen, like a male bonobo and a female chimp. They're both like docile or whatever. Like,
that would probably be better for everyone involved.
Like you first, no you. Like, who's in charge now?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not totally convinced that human males and females are the same species.
Oh God, yeah. It depends entirely. It depends entirely on which male and which female. Because I have met girls way more boyish than some of the males that I've met, and vice versa. And then I've also met the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I think the secret is humans are just really, really weird because we are like what we're doing. Yeah. We have
no idea what we're doing. We're just trying to work it out.
Yeah, we're like the accidental self-aware AI gone rogue.
We got this whole language thing we're working on. It's not that great, but it's going.
It's fine. It's fine. We all picked different ones, but we're really getting a handle on it. So
yeah, I've heard two hypotheses that when we split from the pan thing. One was we were bipedal before we split. Other ones we were bipedal after we split.
Yeah, it depends on if you want to put Sahelanthropus as the last common ancestor. The thing is that we have Sahelanthropus sort of remains dated to around 7 to 10, I think, million years ago. But again, speciation and divergence times are very different. So that doesn't preclude Sahelanthropus from being the last common ancestor. And Sahelanthropus definitely was capable of bipedal walking to a greater extent than modern chimps and bonobos are today, just based off of the shape of the pelvis and the femoral head. Or rather how they would kind of go together. So
that theory, they kind of lost the bipedality.
It wouldn't. Yeah, it would be more probably of an inclination of like you had a Sahelanthropus species living in like sort of a woodland type area, and then once you have the sort of situation with the East African Rift doing its sinking deal, and then you get this dry savanna where a population comes to rely more heavily on bipedality. And then, of course, the other half, right, ends up in what would become the lush areas of Kenya and Tanzania and the Congo, et cetera, where they can then take advantage of the arboreality that they had. At least that's what I imagine would probably go down. I think jury's still out. Sahelanthropus is still tentatively pointed to as the last common ancestor between the two of us. But another interesting thing about that is Sahelanthropus has smaller canines than both modern chimps and modern bonobos.
It also has a foramen magnum that is intermediate between that of chimps and humans.
It does. Actually, I think it might be intermediate between us and Afarensis, but it's definitely more close to humans than it is to chimps. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why they're like, well, maybe it was similar to like the Artipiths, the Artipithecus ramidus and Cadaba, which were fully capable of walking on 2 feet for periods of time, but they still spent substantial periods up in the trees for sleep.
Artipithecus is just weird.
I love the Artipiths. I think they're charming. They're so weird, but they're weird in a good way. I don't know. I like them in the same way that I like proboscis monkeys. You know.
Yeah. So we were. I guess we decided like, okay, you guys can have the trees and stuff. We'll take this grassland.
Yeah, I feel like it was almost more like, well, this is where we normally meet Group B, and then they're like, well, that's a pretty big hill to climb. What happened to the continent? And then they were like, well, let's just not go meet them this time. I'm sure this problem will fix itself. And then here we are, you know, 1 million years later, very different animals. But yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I feel comfortable saying if Sahelanthropus is in our last common ancestor with chimps, it was probably something very similar.
Okay. Speaking of the artists.
I got you.
The A ones.
Yes.
Do we know which of the or if any of the A branches that we're closely related to, or
it's tentative, but I believe as of right now, or at least when I learned in 2016, I haven't looked as of late. But Artipithecus ramidus is typically thought to be in our lineage. Along with Sahelanthropus or perhaps Auroran tugenensis, it's one of the two, or perhaps both, like a la hybridization sort of. And then once we get into the Australopiths, I believe as of now it's Anamensis and Africanus, or rather Afarensis, but not Africanus, because Africanus is essentially an Anamensis branch that ends up in South Africa.
Africanus, is that the Lucy one or the?
Afarensis is the Lucy one. The easy way of thinking of it is this is actually how I remembered it learning it. But the camp, when they discovered Lucy, was playing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles. Afarensis, far out. It's like the Beatles, hippie, Farensis, Lucy.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, so, I believe Africanus is on the way to the Paranthropines, isn't it?
It depends on who you talk to, because I believe, if I remember correctly, there are contemporary Paranthropines hanging out with, not necessarily with, but at least overlapping in habitat with some members of the Australopiths.
Well, sure.
But it could be like just sort of like a delay. You know what I mean? Like sort of how we see Eusthenopteron existing at the same time as perhaps some tetrapods.
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a late surviving lineage. That's
exactly.
With DNA could be a little bit older, so we could actually than what it is now, so we can actually more verify these branches here.
Yeah, the interesting thing is with the Paranthropines is that their brain case was actually substantially larger than the Australopiths. And they also lasted quite a lot longer than the Australopiths did, or lasted longer into the future than the Australopiths did, presumably because the Australopiths sort of beget what would become genus Homo.
Kind of like how the Erectus branches last a little bit longer.
Listen, Erectus is an absolute pro. Okay, Erectus dominates the hominids. Erectus was so fruitful, and there's some debate because some people are like, "Look, Erectus is so variable that we maybe shouldn't be calling all of these skulls Erectus, like all these crania, because there's so much variability in brow ridge and brain case size, and there's constantly in primates, especially, there's this battle between sex or species." So for a long time, especially with like the old world monkey fossils, they would be like, all right, do we have two different species of Egyptopithecus, or is this a male and a female of the same species, and they're just sexually dimorphic?
Well, I believe that even happened with some of the Australopithecines.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But strangely, not with the Artipiths. Like the Artipiths, we have a decent fossil record for, and they have like zero sexual dimorphism. It's very weird.
Yeah, I'm watching the documentary, and I think it was History Channel. I forget where it was at, or it was YouTube or something. But where they found this was back. This guy found this skull in South Africa. He thought it was a thing, but because of the Piltdown man thing, they didn't accept it or something, because we had our own theories about how brains got bigger and smaller.
Oh yeah, the Brits had Piltdown man. Well, it was a hoax, which not even all of them believed. Only some of them, but yeah, it was a hoax put on them, possibly by the writer of Sherlock Holmes. He's one of the people implicated in that. But the idea was, well, part of the problem was you're right. It seemed like, okay, why are the fossils of human ancestors coming out of Asia? Because they didn't have yet the Australopithecines, but they had like Erectus. They're like, why are they coming out of Asia? What's up with that? And so when they found this, they're like, oh, well, clearly here's our British, our nice British transitional fossil. And then as they were finding the Australopithecines and the others, it started to look more and more like, what?
But my racism.
But my race, yeah. But and what's funny enough is one thing creationists never ever bring up is actually the Piltdown man was refuted within like 10 years of its discovery.
Oh, not only, yeah, every single hoax that has ever been a hoax in anthropology has been refuted by other anthropologists.
Yep. Yeah.
Not by creationists.
Yeah, and the other one wasn't even a hoax. It was a mistake. Like the Nebraska was a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a Nebraska man. What do they call it? Hesperopithecus.
Yeah.
And yeah, the thing, you're right. It wasn't by the definition of a hoax. And again, even Osborne was like, yeah, well, we should probably wait a little bit for more data to come in, which is why he commissioned more expeditions to the locality. But the only thing that came out of it, which Kent Hovind has trumpeted for years, is the drawing in the magazine.
The drawing. The lines on... You know what Kent said that really pissed me off in a debate? I think it was actually with...
It was just one thing?
No, more than the other thing.
Okay. What was it?
I think it was in his debate with Bill Ludlow. Anyways, Bill is showing all of the incredible sort of recreations that we have of the hominids, and Bill is of course very clear that these are recreations with what we have, and obviously this is not a one-to-one. This is more for the sake of education and sort of assisting in like forensic anthropology and things like that. And Kent, one of the first things he says is, he's like, well, I appreciate that you went ahead and noted that they are recreations, but I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think you ought to question why all of them are so dark-skinned. But anyways, and he kind of moves on. And I was like, wait, did Ken just call anthropology racist because things that live at the equator tend to have dark skin?
He's so beyond moronic, it would not surprise me.
And I was like, oh my God, I've never heard that one before. I have never heard someone point to a replication of Australopithecus afarensis and be like, it's racist because it's dark-skinned. And I was like, it lives at the equator, Kent. What is wrong with you?
That a lot of things, to be frank. But
I was weird to focus on.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Bill before you passed?
I didn't. It's so sad. And the thing is I was scheduled. I was on the calendar to be on his Leaving Creationism about a month after he passed. I was scheduled for like late September.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have him on my podcast before he passed away.
What's the saddest thing? One of the last messages that he and I had, I went to a gem and mineral show, and one of the tables had these rocks from the Ludlow mine. And so I took a picture of it and I sent it to him, and that was one of our last conversations.
Well, I bet he loved that though.
Yeah, he was sharp all the way to the end.
Hmm.
You know, no one ever knew. No one knew. And then just all of a sudden, that was it.
We got that tweet or Facebook message that says, "Hey, he's in the hospital right now. He's passing away." And then
that was just the only thing, and it was like, dang.
like what?
Yeah, that really is, that sums it up. It was just kind of like
the other.
sucks.
I mean, it does. Yeah. To be fair, the other thing that Hovind focused on, you said it was such a weird thing to focus on, was the eye. He always talks about the eyes.
The brow ridges that grow, they continue to grow.
Oh well, no. I mean, there is that, but I was thinking of the white in the eye, because he's like, there are some. What?
Go ahead. I know what you're gonna say, but I agree.
No, yeah, he's like, why does the Australopithecus have whites in its eyes? They're apes, only humans have whites in their eyes. It's like,
so wrong. Just wrong. Just blatantly, like, all you have to do is like just Google gorillas, chimpanzees, whatever you want. Scroll down for like 2 seconds, you'll see like 4.
Right.
That drives me crazy. And Genesis Apologetics does that too, and like the effort is, the bar is on the floor, you guys.
It's in the basement.
Yeah.
Look, Google it. Like, and in the age of information, we're still having this conversation. I have no idea how.
Yeah. Back to that debate of class, I one thing that took out to me in that debate was Ken was always talking about individuals, and Bill's like populations, not individuals.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Well, because Bill understands how evolution works and Kent doesn't. So.
Because I guess individuals, I guess you have Noah and his kids are individuals. Everything happened, but
yeah, Kent has come out since and openly been like, well, yeah, that's what they say now. They say, populations are not individuals because I called them out. And I'm like, Kent, do you think you invented population?
Kent, how old are you? It's like, I guarantee there were people before you were born who were in population genetics.
Saying this. Like, kills me with that. He kills me with that. And what kills me even more is that it's like, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. But when someone is like, hey, you're wrong, that's when you're like, oh, shoot, I'm wrong. And then you change the script a little bit. Just a little. Make an effort. Pretend to make an effort, please.
Oh, he can't be wrong because, that would mean that everything he's ever stood for is wrong. And that just can't happen. Mm-hmm. Even though it is all wrong. So it's always been wrong.
We're both shocked and appalled. What's the phrase? It's like, I'm not surprised, just disappointed.
I asked for nothing and I was still disappointed. Yeah. That's one where from, was it Casablanca? I'm shocked to find that gambling is happening in this establishment. Here are your winnings. Thank you.
Or the Arrested Development dead dove inside. He looks at it, he's like, I don't know what I expected.
Yeah, it's
you may not regret this, but maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but soon it's the rest of your life.
What's funny is he has actually changed. What's funny is he's extremely selective about the arguments he's been called out on and has changed, because he actually has a few. The whole, is it the shrinking sun, I think, is one of them.
Was it the frozen mammoths?
No, I think he still touts that. He still touts the stupid
like freeze frozen mammoths in Siberia or whatever.
Well, because that's Walt Brown's. Walt Brown had.
Is that the 2 million years to give birth thing?
Wait, wait, specify. 2 million years to give birth?
Well, I don't know if it was a mammoth or something else, or like.
Are you talking about the Ophthalmosaurus or the Ichthyosaurus, the fossil of giving birth? It looks like it's giving birth.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And it's expelled the baby. So yeah, there's actually there's that one, and there's another picture kind of like that with like a fish swallowing another fish, and they use those two pictures as like, look, it was instantaneous. Okay, fish are stupid. Try to swallow and it will get stuck in their throat and they will die. This is, you can find this like a picture. It takes. You're right. It's just Google it. Just Google fish with another fish in its mouth. It's not hard.
Yeah, it's so
idiot.
So easy. It's not even the idiocy; it's the laziness.
It
Like
is.
you know, you cannot claim to be, you cannot complain that the scientific community isn't taking you seriously when you don't even perform a Google search about what you're looking for.
And again, it goes back to what we started at the beginning of the thing, is admitting that you can be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. You're dead right. That's completely true. That's oh boy.
Yeah, as RJ and I show in our book, which everyone should get, they're dead wrong on everything. I mean, just plug it right. Well, hey, I have something to plug now, so there we go. Because I can't plug my own channel.
Like,
yeah, fair enough.
You have a book you can show yet, or you have your own copy yet to show?
Oh no, it's on Amazon though. But I mean, I'm like Tony Reed. It's like, I got this channel. I never talk about it.
Yeah.
I never tell people about it. Like, oh yeah, someone says like, I watch YouTube. It's like, yeah.
You're like, you don't have your own DVD series for 1985?
I have a 12-part DVD series, which I made in 1985. You can watch. It's available for 3 installments of $39.99.
You can buy it, watch it, and send it back and give your money back, except for the shipping, because the thing costs like £50 to ship anywhere.
And drink lots of water while you're watching. Lots of water.
Whales belong, okay, in the water.
Okay.
This is the dumbest theory I have ever heard.
And it's dangerous.
All right, and it's dangerous.
The dumbest and most dangerous idea.
Dangerous religion.
Religion. That's what he says. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my god.
He's just such a meme.
It is such a meme, honestly. Kent is an enigma. I'll never truly understand, and I have come to terms with that.
Oh, I think I understand. It's green. It rhymes with funny. I think I understand it quite well.
But I've heard a hypothesis, that was true or not. Maybe my information is outdated at this point. That there is things about habilis if he's on the Homo side or the Opisthotherian side.
Yeah, mostly it has to do with brain case and with, as usual, like the shoulders and the proportions of the body. Because habilis has this really nice 700, 900-ish centimeters squared brain case size, which is much larger than the Australopithecines, which is why most people are like, no, it's a member of genus Homo. Alongside the equally as important presence of tools with Australopithecus with habilis, as well as potentially like group living in sort of a settlement type fashion, the home base, so to speak. And that's just because we find sort of conglomerations of bones, and a lot of the bones have hash marks on them, which suggests using tools to kind of strip the meat from them. And the fact that they brought kills back to a singular location, which no primate other than humans does today, which is really cool and unique. So I would say firmly, based off of at least what I know, that based on those two facts alone, habilis belongs with genus Homo, or at the very least in its own genera that bridges the gap. Because the thing is that you also have Rudolfensis, which
can't use that word here.
Yeah, I was gonna say which. It depends on who you talk to, because I was taught that Rudolfensis is habilis, that they're one and the same. But some would agree with you, and I always try to give them a shout out as well, because
anthropologists or paleoanthropologists are like frighteningly obsessed with names. They
are, and the thing is, they're savage to each other. They will rip. I mean, as many scientists are, but it's like primatology too. Like, I have several professors that, like, if a paper comes out that's kind of dissing either them or what their supervisors have kind of touted, like, let's say, for instance, the social brain hypothesis, because my supervisor now, her supervisor was Robin Dunbar, who invented the social brain hypothesis.
Ooh.
So anytime anybody is like dissing the social brain, my supervisor's like, hold up. To the point, oh no, my camera. I'm all blurry now. To the point
It looks like my sight without my glasses.
Yeah, same. To the point that when Decassian, who's another primatologist, came out and was like, well, maybe diet has something to do with it. My supervisor wrote this enormous comments on Decassian's work, that was in and of itself its own publication. And it was so like absolutely savage. Like we all had to read it for our course. And
of course.
We came out of it and we were like, she like roasted him. Like she like spent the whole paper just and it's so like in academic language. It's like, we appreciate the work that Decassian has added to,
but he's dumb.
But you're stupid and I hate you. Like
Right.
it was really, yeah, so the habilis rudolfensis debate is one that I don't intend to be a part of. I'm just going with what my professor said. Habilis is
TD Lane says it's borderline heresy, not quite nanotyrannus levels of heresy. Actually, that one got settled, I believe. So,
thank God. Yeah, and yet we still find rudolfensis. I have like 2 books on human evolution over on my shelf over there that have rudolfensis like as its own thing. And every time I see it, I'm like, So yeah, I would say that you'll be hard pressed to find an anthropologist today that thinks habilis belongs with the Australopithecines, especially with the more specimens we find.
Awesome. So
no,
I don't know if there's more, but
I mean, there other like. Oh, go ahead.
Well, you can keep talking. I'm trying to find this picture. I'm trying to find a picture or something.
Oh, okay, I've even heard like there are that a couple of other genera have been proposed within the hominins, like Kenyanthropus. What are your thoughts on that?
So Kenyanthropus is really interesting because where it's dated, it's either this super enigmatic primate that has this ridiculously long sort of success period. We're talking overlapping with the Artipiths, overlapping with the Australopiths, and overlapping all the way up to essentially habilis. Because the problem is we find evidence with Kenyanthropus that it was a tool user. And Kenyanthropus is an older primate, an older hominid. I believe, I want to say contemporary with Artipithecus, but let me check. Kenyanthropus platyops. Yeah, 3.5 to 3.2 million years ago. So contemporary, not with Artipithecus ramidus, but certainly with Afarensis, who was not a tool user, by the way.
He was just a tool.
Was a tool, yeah, depending on who you talk to. I'm sure Lucy's kin would say that since she fell out of a tree. So it's Kenyanthropus is honestly very weird, also because its brain case is somewhat primitive. Obviously, having a small brain case doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be a tool user, because Floresiensis was an avid tool user and also had, I believe, some forms of symbolism or art, at least like decoration of bodies and things like this. So the Kenyanthropus situation is honestly, and I've looked into it, kind of an enigma. It's sort of in the same way that, like, I'm sure you know about like Rising Star Cave with Naledi.
Right. Mm-hmm. And they're not really, have they dated that conclusively yet?
I don't believe they've dated Rising Star yet. I know Naledi is contemporary with Heidelbergensis, Erectus, Neanderthalensis, Denisovans, and Floresiensis. It overlaps with all 5. I mean, we're talking about an organism that did very well because it was kind of by itself down there.
Sure.
In South Africa. And that's why, even though it has this relatively large population, we presume, based off of the dead found in Rising Star Cave, it has a small brain case and really primitive, so really basal shoulders, so to speak. Like, we're talking like it's still got that rotation that's much more similar to a chimp's than it is to ours, which is more locked in place for stability of the shoulder girdle. But the weird thing about Rising Star Cave is how these bodies are positioned inside of it. It is ridiculously difficult to get into Rising Star Cave.
They'd have a person like crawl in and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a when I was taking human evolution in 2016, Lee Berger sent out a big call for female PhD anthropology students because who were under a certain height, or male could get under the certain height, but you had to be very small and petite because he physically couldn't fit in there. You know, Lee Berger's a big guy, like he's not small, and there's all these weird contortions, and there's a chute involved. And some of the questions to do with Rising Star Cave in general isn't just how did they manage to get in, but how did they see anything? Because we don't have evidence to suggest that Naledi was capable of using fire, which is very odd considering
night vision.
Yeah, but it's weird, right? And the thing is that also none of the predators that we typically suspect of Naledi kind of sort of housed themselves in such a deep, dark cave. And there's also no geologic activity that currently suggests that there was some shift.
Yeah, that would have been my next question. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too, because I was like, well, maybe it used to be easier, but now it's not. But we don't have any evidence of that yet. It's possible, I think, what they're investigating is that maybe there used to be sort of a vertical shaft at some point that by some means has been plugged or is no longer accessible, whatever. But as of now, it's a total mystery as to why all these bodies are in there and what put them there. And I would put Kenyanthropus in the same sort of, we straight up have no idea right now.
Yeah, I forgot the thing real fast. As far as I know, at least I might be thinking, there was at least 3 speciations from Africa, the Homo erectus ones, then the Hylobatidae that came, the Neanderthals and the Yovicens, and then we came out of Africa ourselves.
Yes, I think that is what is current with the literature, is that it's sort of like a multi-regional, or at least numerous out of Africa.
It's like, watch that word.
Yeah, I was like, the thing is you say it because it's kind of similar. It's like a weird hybrid of the two.
Yeah.
So you're like, I say it, and then I'm like, I'm gonna make someone angry. I better.
You're gonna be like your professor.
Oh, he at the time too. He was a big out of Africa guy, so he was like not a big fan.
I heard a 4th one might be. I was sure not by a hypothesis or a theory or something that the Hobbit one is more closely related to the habilis and then Erectus. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know. I don't know about that. The only thing with that is that I would find it at least a little bit surprising that sort of the tool use that Floresiensis is found equipped with is so similar to Denisovans, which is geographically similar, close by.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we just don't know that much about Denisovans. Like, we have way more stuff that Denisovans used than we do Denisovans.
Yeah, there's like a tooth before. I think before like this year or last year or something like that. There was only a tooth known, and that's where they got like some DNA from.
I think they might have had a finger bone as well.
Yeah,
like a finger bone. But for a long time, I mean, the reason Denisovans doesn't have like its binomial nomenclature is because we don't know enough about it. We barely have anything from it. But that's also kind of weird because we also don't have like a formal. We have like Gigantopithecus, blacki, but we also only have teeth and knuckles from that. So I'm not really sure what they're waiting for, but I don't know.
They're afraid they'll start fist fighting again with the paleoanthropologist.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate
they will.
I don't know how accurate this chart was, but I remember it from a long time ago. It might be outdated by now, but that the Agaster split into Erectus and Hylobatidae and Hylobatidae is split again into Neanderthal.
Depends on whether or not Ergaster is its own one.
That's what I was going to say too, because the thing is some people lump Ergaster in with Erectus and some don't. Some say Erectus is just super enigmatic and very.
Like Ergaster is just a Homo erectus from Africa.
Yeah, right. It just depends on who you talk to. Same thing with Australopithecus gari. I've heard that gari is very similar to Afarensis or Africanus. I can't remember, one of the two.
Is Sediba on there?
I don't know. Is Sediba on here? Australopithecus Sediba.
I can't really. They're very letters are so small.
No Sediba.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting though, because next to Homo rudolfensis, they also have Kenyanthropus. Like, Kenyanthropus rudolfensis is going to be a name.
Well,
I think so. Oh man.
And besides,
Sure, right.
and besides the interbreeding thing, they think my pronunciations, the Denovans are more closely related to the Neanderthals. Besides,
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it seems like based on genetic data.
And the thing is too is that I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, they frequently interbred. They were just geographically together, more closely together for longer. It
'Cause
seems intuitive.
we were down in Africa catching some sun. They were up north.
Yeah.
And then we all interbred.
Yeah, then it was a big party. That's where the bonobo and then we went chimp on everybody.
Yikes!
Unlike
Big
them,
yikes.
we just had to cross. We just had to cross the river,
Yeah.
aka the Mediterranean Sea, to get it
Cross
on.
across the Rubicon more than once. Once in a metaphorical sense.
Oh, it's so sad that we don't. I wonder. I think another excellent question to ask is what happened to the Paranthropines? Like why they were so unsuccessful in comparison to their contemporaries in the Australopithecines.
Didn't they feed? They fed on a different like they were C4 grasses as opposed to C3, weren't they? Wasn't
Yeah, they had I mean, we're talking megadont molars, like molars that were like for the skull size, like enormous. And as you can see in the picture, kind of over to the side, a lot of them have sagittal crests, which none of our relatives have.
Is that when we decided that eating softer food and cooking it made our mouth smaller?
Or at the very least, it's when we decided, hey, maybe we should occasionally like scavenge instead of eating really hard nuts and stripping grasses and bark, because they find a lot of pitting with a lot of the Paranthropines, which is basically just like eating super hard nuts to crack them essentially with their teeth. And then you're right, we also find a lot of like weird plant choices, like sedges, and I don't know, they're weird. The Paranthropines are an odd bunch, and not just because they have those, like they almost, if you see the paleo art for them, they've got like flanges almost. They're very, very odd looking.
All I know is I had to get oral surgery, get my wisdom teeth removed because of our diet change.
I know, isn't that?
I'm gonna have to get all four of mine.
I already got mine out. There's really no other way. I've never had a surgery before outside of wisdom teeth. It was kind of a fun surgery in that, like, I was sitting there, they put the IV in, and they're like, all right, like count backwards. And I was like, oh, that's not going to be like the movies. And then I blinked and I was waking up and I was like, oh my God.
Really? I was semi-awake from mine. I wasn't.
Really? Oh, they knocked me out.
I asked for gas.
Oh, well, they give you the choice.
Yeah, they gave me gas, but then gave me an IV. I only had the gas option.
Really?
I've had two surgical procedures before. I'm going under.
Yeah. I'm
going under.
Yeah, I paid extra for the gas, but where I was at, I didn't have IVs.
Oh my God. Yeah, they were like, you might want to do the gas. And because the thing is, I made the mistake before actually getting the surgery of watching like a procedure.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because I was like, I want to know what they're going to do. And then I was like,
nope, I'm afraid that if they put me on gas, I'll say one of my secrets and then everyone will know.
I know.
I'll just be like, put me under.
my post IV experience was, my parents recorded it. They picked me up. I don't remember any of it, but I've seen the videos. They're not flattering. It's me crying because they're like pruning trees, and I was feeling very empathetic towards the trees. Hey,
those trees, have you ever seen Fern Gully? The trees can feel pain. So, think about that.
So
I swear I read something that said, or it might have been you told me, what was it, like the trees are screaming or whatever?
Oh, for the wisdom teeth?
No, well, like the trees, when they give off like some sort of
grass.
Or is it grass? Okay, yeah, they're the pheromone.
That's that good grass smell.
That's because they're in pain or whatever.
Yeah, they're straight up warning other grass. Like they're like, we're being attacked. We need to like. I don't know what the plan is though. Like,
Run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly why.
I've always wondered if
They're not going anywhere.
I know it's a odd thing.
Yeah, I always wonder if we couldn't interbreed with each other, the Neanderthals and stuff, and them and the Erectus were still around, if they'd be like their own little civilizations community there, or we have like in a zoo or something.
Oh yeah, like a multi-species community. That'd be cool.
It would be amazing, and I can almost guarantee Erectus. I would imagine Erectus would be fine. Neanderthals would be fine. They would almost certainly be fine. I think we have a hyoid bone from a Neanderthal, and I think current lit suggests that they at least had rudimentary speech capabilities, and they probably had the capacity to understand, similar to a level that we can, but obviously not by and large as cognitively sort of intuitive as we are. I don't think they ever actually developed like long range weapons, which is why a lot of them have terrible injuries upon their death, because they get up and like brawl with their prey. It's interesting too, because males and females both have these injuries, so it's actually thought that they didn't do really the division of labor either, that sapiens eventually did, because they were just like, well, we're all pretty big.
Yeah, I've heard the differences sometimes that we learned the throw test from closer from they're up close, and we were more of a distance spear thrower.
Yeah. Well, humans are actually as far as I know, best throwers in the animal kingdom, and one of the best persistence runners. And we're weirdly talented in weird ways.
They're like, we get close to this rhino or mammoth, they attack us. Maybe we should go from it a little further away.
Just take your ladle and just throw it at them.
Exactly. Yeah. Big. They're like, all right, we can throw these rocks, but what if the rock was sharp?
Then they're like,
oh my gosh!
Instead of rocks, let's take this metal stuff.
Metallurgy. Let us take a moment and remember Noachian metallurgy and Canaanite genetics. These are the things that we need to stop and appreciate.
I think like when you think of guns, you're like, what if we could throw metal but fast?
I love.
Oh, then thinking of guns, it was like, instead of wasting time stuffing this with gunpowder and stuffing this bullet down all the time, what if we made it spin and put lots of them in there?
You really think about it, and a lot of human history has just been exploding things in different ways. Like explode a ball of metal, make it go fast. Explode lots of fuel, drive a car. Like it's
or what is this white thing that came out of the chicken's butt? I'm gonna eat it.
Yep, yeah, and pour one out for all of the relatives that we have in the long distant past who have tried things and found out the hard way that you can't eat them. This mushroom looks a lot like the one that Grog ate last week, and it worked out just fine for him. That was a mimic.
Whoops, it was death cap. Yikes.
Yep.
Trial and error.
Yeah, it really is a lot
trial
of
and error with people.
I think Louis C.K. said it. He was like, people, and then I gotta go, guys, because it's 2:37 for me. But I have a blast. Louis C.K. made this quote where he was like, people look at the pyramids, and they're like, wow, like that's incredible. He's like, throw enough human life at anything, and anything is possible.
We can do this again when you get back from your trip.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and hopefully, I mean, the reason I'm not scheduling anything is because I don't know what my Wi-Fi is going to be like. Allegedly.
I gotta say, if you get Wi-Fi, we could do a live stream right from your dig site. Okay, this is from Erica live.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's dependent. I know I have access to Wi-Fi in the village.
You have to do the Attenborough voice though. Like, over there are two geladas, and look, they're fighting right now.
What?
Oh, they see me. Run.
Like, why can they have good internet in the middle of the jungle?
Yeah, if I'm capable, it'll definitely be from my fields for my camp.
Probably could do like little videos, like edited videos.
Or recordings.
Yeah.
Oh
you know.
yeah, I'm stocking up videos now. It's
Or like
taking me
just
forever.
have a GoPro to your chest while you're doing your thing.
There you go.
The funny thing is I really would like to take a GoPro out there because these macaques are habituated, and habituated macaques habituated any monkeys. The adults pretty much ignore you, but the juveniles are really, really interested. And so you have to stay, decently still because you're observing. And then you're sitting and the juveniles just come up and they're just like messing with you, and they want to see what's up. They're curious, and you got to be like, little man, step back.
Yeah, if we had
I'm
more
observing.
time,
Yeah.
if we had more time, I would love to talk about the ERVs in our group ancestry, how that's
Oh,
connected.
absolutely. Yeah, I hope you mostly, you pretty much have a good handle on what the current lit is saying on a lot of the stuff. I mean, things are getting more and more solid in human evolution as we find, more specimens and the genetics
Yeah,
get tighter and all that stuff.
like about how it happened twice in the same branches, like the same exact spot. The virus decided the same
That one kills me. That one and the gulo breakage both kill me.
Oh, they don't even. They just don't think about it.
Yeah, they don't. In the same way that our our lovely synapsids are left off the ark almost every time.
Right. The really fun thing about Gulo is it can't even be. It cannot be transcribed. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because the promoter region is broken. So the funny thing. So I love when they're like, there are 100% of the DNA is functional. Okay, then tell me why can't Gulo? Why is it that it can't even be transcribed? It's not like it's a negative argument. Like we don't know what it does. We know what it does. We know where it is.
And it can't be transcribed.
It can't work. It literally cannot work. And they're just like,
Wait a second. Yeah, I think it was RJ actually who said this to Stand for Truth. He was like, you cannot use an exception to make the rule. Where he's like, well, some ERVs do something. Look at this one that has to do with embryonic development. And he's like, okay, well, look at this other enormous pile that do nothing. And we know them. We know where they are, and we know they don't do anything.
Okay, before you both go, do you have any future videos you want to talk about coming up in your channels?
Oh, I got a lot of stuff coming over the next 3 months because I'm preparing it in advance. So it should release in relatively quick succession. Again, Monkey Mondays is coming, just very slowly.
Okay. What about you, Jackson? Any future videos coming up?
Technically, yes. We have a rebuttal video which I'm slowly piecing together because it's going to be quite long. This is going to be my final or our final response to long story short. Until he reads another intelligent design book and decides to make a video again, then we'll get him again. I have to say, all of my videos on his stuff have gotten more views than his stuff has.
And so, that's always a good sign.
Except, to be let me rephrase that, on his channel, because when he posted, or the Discovery Institute hosted his homology video, and it's got like 10,000 or so, or probably more than that now, but the stuff on his own channel, because I can't do anything about the Discovery Institute, all of my videos on his stuff have more views than his own stuff. And so,
yeah. I think when they use the big boys to plug their videos, that kills me. And Genesis Apologetics does that too.
Well, to be fair, I had Aaron Raw posted one of my videos on his channel, we did kind of a collab sort of thing. We did a collab, and he also posted one of my videos which was on it wasn't on Long Story Short. It was on when Steve Meyer was on PragerU. And
God, that was so bad.
I love that these guys. You know what?
Jackson's video wasn't that bad, Erica. It was pretty good. Jackson had a pretty good video. It wasn't that bad.
Well, I don't think we should be surprised. This is a group that has bad history, bad economics, and bad climate change. Oh, they became creationists. Is anyone surprised by this?
No.
Well, calling them a university is like calling the Crazy Museum a museum.
Yeah, Dennis Prager, who is like directly funded by the Koch brothers, like has bad climate change takes. I'm shocked.
Shocked.
Oh my God, that's just like a completely different animal, just because Mega funded.
Oh, but other than the long story short video, sort of I've got like the genetic series that I keep meaning to get back to and I keep putting off. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, fast. Well, before we go, as for me, besides my Kingdom Hearts series, I'm finally uploading after a year of recording. A year later, I recorded. Next Saturday, I'm going to have the Dapper Dino on the podcast. So if you're available to check it out, be sure to check out the audience. In the meantime, as I always say, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time.